Member Hicks?
Here.
Member Rosenberger? Here. Member Fox?
Here.
Member Santa Cruz?
Here.
Okay, a full house. We'll open the meeting. First item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of our November meeting. Would someone like to make a motion to approve those minutes as submitted? Or any changes?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. The minutes have been accepted. Agenda overview. Anything on the agenda overview, Heather?
No, I think we
I'm
just,
blank.
it's pretty
Everything on
straight
our
up.
agenda will be heard tonight, so if you're here for anything, it will be on the agenda and will be addressed. Moves us right into item 5. Look at that, quick as a wink. We're at design review applications by consent. We're going to pull off item 5C from the consent agenda item and talk about it a little bit. So items 5A and 5B, consent agenda items for anybody in the audience that has an objection or would like to speak to item 5A or 5B, if you could make yourself known. We address the consent agenda as one approval with architectural design review comments taken into consideration. Any objections? If not, we'll take a motion to approve items 5A and 5B on the consent agenda item. Consent agenda. Anybody?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 5A and 5B. 5C, we will address independently. If we could read that into the record, and I do want to invite the folks from Novus or Brixmor up to have a couple of questions. So if we want to read that into the record.
Novus Group, on behalf of Brixmor Capital, requests the board sign off on architectural design review conditions of approval for a major site plan for construction of 3 new buildings for restaurant, retail, and coffee shop use with a drive-through facility at 80 Store Street in the Opportunity Corridor Performance District.
Okay, could we get a quick staff update on this? I don't know if anybody is prepared to do that. If not, I can move right ahead.
Happy to. So yes, the applicant did appear before ADR on November 30th. They're very pleased with the revisions, with the relocation of the door and with the facade changes to the 110.
For clarity, ADR wasn't very pleased, or the applicant was very pleased?
ADR was pleased.
Excellent.
It's in the
Sure, the
minutes.
applicant was pleased as well, but ADR was pleased.
I
Thank
think
you.
the applicant was pleased that ADR was pleased, which pleased ADR. So overall, big improvement. There was one comment about a kind of flying awning on the Starbucks that was asked to be reconsidered. But overall, ADR was happy. There are a number of outstanding comments in regards to some landscaping, a couple of ADA things, and some just consistency between the plan sheets, but very minor. The staff is recommending ADR approval.
Okay, and just again, for the record, we did hear this applicant back in June. We did issue a conditional approval with some ADR overviews, and I asked the folks to come up tonight because I know I had a question on the door and I had a couple of questions on the outstanding issues. But if you guys could just state your names for the record.
Yeah, I'm Chris Netto with Novus Group.
Great.
Mark Newman with Brixmor Property Group.
Sean Lau with Cree Architecture.
Great. Chris, do you have a picture that you can show us? Oh, perfect.
Yeah, right here.
Look at you. You're all set, ready to go.
Is there a sign sheet? Yes, there is.
There's a sign-in sheet, so if you guys could just sign in on the sign-in sheet, that'd be great. Thank you. Tell us about it.
All right. Well, so after some back and forth with 110 Grill, we've come up with this layout where the door is right on the corner here. This is the front along Store Street, obviously, and the door's here. We do have some grade change between the building and the sidewalk. The building actually sits down a couple of feet from Store Street. So the best layout really worked for just getting the door around the corner. But you can see it's very visible from the street and very well connected to the street. And then some of the other changes, I can either answer questions about
No, go ahead.
110
Yeah.
or we can look at the other
Go through the whole thing
elevations.
if you can.
And maybe you guys can speak a little bit.
All the
more.
materials are different from what
Yeah.
you had seen last
Yeah.
time.
So it's mainly the brick and
Just pull that mic over a little bit for us if you could, for you. Thank you.
Yes, it's 110 grill is mostly majority brick with accents of the longboard aluminum siding, that gray material. So I believe that addresses all the material items.
Go back up, Chris. What elevation, the next one up, what elevation is that?
That's facing the
The little,
the middle building.
the alleyway there?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yep.
correct.
It's actually the north elevation, isn't it?
No,
No.
no,
No, that's
Oh, is that south?
Yeah.
south elevation.
That's the parking lot side. This is the center building.
No, this is the Starbucks
Oh,
building.
sorry.
Yep.
So that's in the alleyway between the two buildings. And then this is the front of the building. I think the discussion was about this canopy.
Yeah, the
which-
discussion was about the
Right.
the flying canopy, which
Yep.
we've already revised, and we got print copies if you'd like to see that
Okay.
as well. But,
Starbucks has approved
yeah, we
the
reviewed it with
revision
them.
made to the,
M has approved it for the, you know.
yes.
Correct.
Sorry.
This is the drive-through side.
So drive-through is still set up the same way as it was before, so they'll come down towards stores, loop around, and be facing back into the parking lot.
Yep, that's right.
And just to be clear, that's not a literal representation.
Yes.
The colored features that you see with the semicircles, that's basically where I think we're gonna feature local artists that will be able to display there.
Question?
Yes, sir. Go
Are
ahead.
you talking about a rotating display or a permanent?
No, I don't believe it would be rotating.
So it's a permanent
Kind of like a-
piece of artwork?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman.
certainly.
And then that's the parking lot side with a pickup window, and there is a door on the back side, but the primary door is in the front. And then, that's the middle building?
Yeah, that's the middle
That's
building.
The alleyway. Yeah. There's the
So with
front.
the middle building, we've revised all the materials, so it's again, majority brick, with the middle tenant being like a granite tile or granite stone. So eliminating all the clapboard and those items.
What's the middle tenant there? What's the material on that?
That's the, like a granite or stone.
Okay.
And then there's the elevation,
Faces Starbucks.
Right.
Or
Let's just start.
coffee shop.
then there's the parking lot elevation.
Yep.
So, we go back up, you can just get the perspective from all.
There's actually, I think the ends with a couple of perspectives too.
For some reason, I don't
They're not
think they're in here. I think I went all the way to the end. Did.
Oh, okay. And then the front perspective.
And the alleyway space, I don't call it an alleyway, but the space between the two, the left building and the middle building, is that blocked from the street? So Store Street, will you be able to see right through that alleyway, or is there
You
some
can
type
see
of
there's
block?
if you look right here, there's a brick sort of wall between the two that closes off the alleyway, and then there's a door.
And then the space between the Starbucks and that tenant is the same?
That'll
It's
actually,
open? That's
that'll be open, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So then, I want to address the door. So any questions on the door? I know, Jeff, you had a question on the door.
Yeah, the previous approval, we had indicated the door needed to be on Store Street, and they were so close. I'm just wondering why we can't get the door on that opposite corner. If it's entering the same corner of the building, it's not necessarily changing the entire footprint of the inside at this point to have it face on Store Street like the rest of the buildings.
Yeah, the biggest challenge was the grade, honestly. We would have to have stairs to get into the building if it were directly on the front facade.
So there's not a way to do like you've done at the other two buildings and do some sort of wall?
Yeah, there just isn't enough room between Store Street, because the 110 is pulled so far forward on the street. We're actually only, I think, 5 feet off, 4 or 5 feet off the setback of the
The
right of way.
grade's more significant on that side, correct?
Actually, no, it is more on as you head to the south in the other two buildings, but this one is right at that uncomfortable difference where you just can't get the grades to work. It really requires stairs to get in.
So you're assuming though you're coming off the sidewalk down the door. What if you actually came the same way you're coming in, kind of from the side, had the sidewalk to the front of the building and the door there? So yes, people have to walk around and down, but at least the door fronts and gives that appearance that it's facing Store Street. So instead of trying to go down over the hill, you're still going kind of around.
Sure, understood. Yeah, I hadn't really looked at that. 110 had really,
I mean, I think that
Push
this,
further.
I would call this the front of Store Street. I mean, technically, you could say that it's on the side, but really it's on the main corner there of the center. It activates the corner, it activates Store Street right there, creates a pedestrian and cafe corner right there that's activated. And if you take away from that and put the entrance right in front there where you have to sort of walk around to get to it, you're breaking up the continuity, you're breaking up the flow, I think, that exists with this design.
I think just from my perspective, I think I think it looks great. I think the entrance looks great. That's obviously the front of the building. That's obviously the front entrance of the building. Whether the door's on the side or the door's on the front is immaterial, I think, in the big picture. I think that people coming down Store Street will know that they can go right there. People coming down Pleasant Street Extension know that that's the front. People that are in the parking lot will walk around through and know that that's the front as well. So
And there's no longer an entrance on the parking lot
yeah,
side,
so
which
if they're
was
gonna come, they gotta come that way, so,
a big change in,
yeah. Okay. Matt?
I just wanted to, I agree with you, Mr. Chairman. I think that this is what the intent was in our last meeting. So I appreciate the change, and the entrance is not in the parking lot, so I'm fully supportive of this.
Okay, and you said you've got any other questions? Sorry, Byron, anybody? No?
I'll
You
make
said-
I'll make a
Yep.
comment, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I very frustrated that it's not facing Store Street. I understand what the chairman says, I understand what Matt says, but I'm very sympathetic with what Jeff says. I mean, you know, and I mean, you know, if I wanted to be hard-nosed, I would say, you know, does this conform to the condition upon which the approval was based? Which, you know, we can fudge it and say, yes, it is, because it's moved almost up to the front of the building. I'm not sure what the huge issue is here about not having it on the front of the building. I will settle for this, but
well, first of all, it's a grade issue. There is an issue with the grade there, A. B, I think because this is what I would call a corner piece in that it sits on the driveway coming in,
Yeah.
I think that to a certain degree, the most important thing is to activate that corner. And I think that does more for Store Street than having a entrance that's officially on Store Street, but doesn't necessarily add to what I think you're trying to do, which is activate the pedestrian activity.
well, I mean, I think that there, response, Mr.
Yes, sir,
Chairman, thanks.
go ahead.
I think there are two things we're trying to do. You know, and one is, yes, to activate that corner. The other is, we're setting a precedent for all future development on that street. And that's why it's important. So, you know, because anybody, as we said the last time, I think it was sitting here the last time, is that, you know, the next developer who comes is going to point to you guys and say, well, if they did it, or if they did it that way, why can't we do it that way? So that's why it's a sticking point, but,
It's compromise, I think, again, I think entrance is subjective. I think the way the roof line lines up, I think it's very indicative of, hey, this is where you come in the building. You said you had some revised drawings. If we could get those over to Sam, or just pass them down around the table here, so we've got the revisions on the record. And those are the ones that address the issue on the Starbucks
Correct.
building, right?
Yeah.
The top of the building.
but I also say that I'm very much looking forward to going in and having a Manhattan and a steak.
Don't look to go in the back door.
Park in the back, you'll have to walk through the
I just want to get them in the record.
I did also go through the plans. I noticed there's still some other things that you need to work on to address some of staff comments. Some of the ADA conditions at the intersection still not completely conforming with MUTCD and ADA requirements in terms of distance between the ramps and accessible push buttons. So I think you need to take another look at the intersection. And I noticed some inconsistencies between your landscape plan and your drainage plan in that new area you've kind of created. There's one, I think on the drainage plan, it calls it out as a catch basin, and then the same structure on the drainage plan is called out as a tree box, and there's a tree in the middle of it.
Yeah, which corner was that?
It's the one that, the right-hand drainage that comes out of the building, that first one has the D there. On the drain, on the landscape plan, it calls that out as a tree box, and there's a tree in it.
Okay.
And that might be the intent, is to be a tree box. I just want to make sure there's consistency, so there's no, you know. And just for a quick question, pull up the grading plan if you would, just for a sec.
Yeah,
I
that's
know you
right
say
here.
there's a grading issue there.
Yeah.
I'm looking and I see that the door is at 244.5 and the sidewalk in that area is at, give or take, 245.5.
That's right.
That's a foot of difference.
Yep.
So I'm not sure, like I said, if you could come in off the same area over the top of what you show as that tree box there with the sidewalk and go in the door, you could still make up the grade as a slope down to that potentially. So I don't know that, I fully agree that grading isn't possible. I agree maybe coming in directly off the sidewalk off stores, but if you still kind of come in from that corner plaza area you created, I think it might still be possible. But again, I understand the comments by other members. It may be, you know, an acceptable consideration.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Any member of the audience have any questions regarding this application? Thought they were all here for that. Okay, we'll close the public hearing, and thank you very much for your presentation. Heather?
I just wanted to make a comment. I wish you guys had talked up your efforts a little more, because I just wanted to say, I know they went to a great deal of effort with these tenants to try to come back, and I think we're really, really happy that you did, and it was a project that we did want to see, and we did want to see it this way. And so I think we're all really, you know, appreciative that it's gonna go in, and that we were able to make it happen. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, good point, and it has been a long road, but hopefully it's done at this point. So, and again, in our packet here, in the packet, we've got just one recommendation to grant ADR approval for the 110 grill building design, site layout and landscape, with the recommendation that the applicant return to ADR with a pedestrian scale signage package, reconsider the slant awning-like feature above the Starbucks entrance, and add awnings above the windows and doors of the Starbucks. So what in our recommendation needs to change there, Sam?
We're all set on the Starbucks. What they've provided complies with ADR's recommendations.
So it's just grant ADR approval for the project completely, right?
Yes.
As submitted.
But as Jeff noted, we will continue to work with them on landscaping and other plan sheet inconsistencies.
Are we going to be receiving a set of comments?
Yep.
Great, okay. And that
I'll be
will
in
be
touch.
cool.
So can I just clarify?
Yeah, yes,
So
please.
what you previously had done was make a motion to approve subject to ADR. Did they make a motion to approve ADR conditionally, or conditionally to the?
So let me just
wanna
read it, let me just
clarify
read
what-
it into the record first. I just want to make sure we get this clear. So during the June 30th planning board meeting, the board voted to approve the application, including ADR approval, subject to the condition that revisions be made to the materials and architecture of the 110 Grill building, including the orientation of the entrance on Store Street, relocation of the sign on the east side of the coffee shop, wood cladding on the middle building be replaced with spandrel glass, and option A for the south elevation of the middle building be used. Any building proposed along the frontage of Store Street shall have a main entrance facing Store Street. So ADR made the following recommendations during their June 1st and November 30th meetings. ADR recommended approval of the building elevations for the middle and southern buildings at the June 1st ADR meeting, subject to the following conditions: replace the horizontal wood cladding on the east and west elevations of the middle building with spandrel glass. Use option A presented in the June 6th meeting for the south elevation of the middle building, and relocate the sign on the eastern elevation of the drive-through restaurant and the northern end of the evaluation so that, the elevation, so that customers are not led to believe that the door sign is currently over an entrance, as this is a service door. At the November 30th meeting, the applicant returned with revised elevations of the 110 grill that addressed ADR's previous comments. So everything has been addressed. The committee recommended approval of the building elevations with the recommendation that the applicant return to ADR for the building signs and ask that they be of pedestrian scale and that the awnings over the entrance to Starbucks. So I think everything's been addressed, right? Yes. Okay, so how do we make the motion to grant ADR approval?
I would suggest that you just determine that the condition has been met.
Okay.
Because you already granted approval subject to X conditions.
So
And now we're back to say X conditions have been met.
So X so we'll
motion to determine that the conditions of approval have been met.
So would someone like to make a motion to determine that the approval conditions have been met and finalize this project? Make that motion.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
You're done.
Thank you.
So, now get it built.
Go that far.
All right, guys, thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
All right. So you guys thought we were moving right along here, so let's go to section 6 is our public hearing, site plan subdivisions and conditional use permit applications. Item 6A, if we could read that into the record.
Wilcox and Barton, on behalf of Havenwood Heritage Heights, request an amendment to a previously approved minor site plan for the relocation of a sidewalk at 149 East Side Drive in the medium-density residential district.
All righty, if we could get a quick staff update on this.
Sure. So they are just proposing to relocate a sidewalk. The sidewalk is encroaching just by a few more feet into the buffer. They had already received a conditional use permit to allow that encroachment, and so they went back to the Conservation Commission for a few more feet of encroachment, which the Conservation Commission was supportive of.
Okay, welcome back to the table. If you could state your name for the record.
Sure. Hello, my name is Erin Lambert with Wilcox and Barton. I'm here on behalf of Havenwood Heritage Heights, requesting, as Sam said, a minor amendment to an approved site plan application. If you've driven by this site, this is at 149 East Side Drive. These homes are completed, the residents have moved in, and that is what necessitated us putting the sidewalk in at the approved location and then coming back to you to ask if we could slide it closer to the tree line. If you look at the plan I'm showing, this sort of white out here is where the sidewalk was approved on our plans and it was built at that location. And we're asking if we can slide the sidewalk closer to the tree line. It is within the buffer to the bluff, which is why we needed to return to you and the Conservation Commission to request that permission. We're not requesting doing any additional tree clearing. It's just, as you'll see in a couple of the photos, it will give the residents a little bit of ability to have more privacy and for us to put some screening, plantings in what is their living room window. So this picture is looking to the east. I apologize for the construction debris, but you can see the sidewalk is very close to these windows, and I have another picture that will zoom in a little bit more. So here's the sidewalk. It's used quite heavily by all of the residents of Havenwood. They've got a loop that goes around the campus, and it's something that's very important to the residents and highly utilized, and you can see it's just very close to this resident's window. So unfortunately, the timing was such that when this came to everyone's attention, to Havenwood, to the residents, of how close it was going to be, time was of the essence, and the sidewalk needed to go in so they could get their their certificates of occupancy. But Havenwood really would like to shift it. In the spring, they'll rip it out. We'd like to place it right over here. So you'll see that this area where there currently is a 5-foot sidewalk and say another foot or so, that will be reclaimed as green space and will be planted with shrubs and other plantings to provide some privacy for these 2 units in building number 42. This is the view of the same building, but the second unit. So this is now looking west. You can see there is a nice area here where we could easily slide it over without impacting the buffer and the tree line. This is a pictorial view of what we're proposing. Again, removing this pavement, installing it, and just making these sidewalk connections a little longer. And again, their landscaper will come in the spring and plant some additional plantings. So thank you for entertaining our request.
Excellent. Any questions from the board? Carol?
I guess one question would be, how deep do you need to dig to, because I can see this movement affecting the trees in the tree line and potentially causing some problems in the not too distant future.
Yeah, so it'll be 3 to 4 inches of pavement and then 6 inches of gravel below it. And this is probably a little ambitious. I think this picture shows a little bit better. that will be away from trees. There's one tree on this corner, otherwise we're still a little bit away from the actual trees themselves. But we will take care, and that's why we'll really field fit it to make sure that we're not, and we can probably take care to keep this a little bit further in so that we, to your point, are not disturbing directly over the roots. After that, there's no trees that are as close as just this one here.
Okay. Any other questions? Any member of the audience have any questions?
I do.
Oh, yes, come on up. Thank you, Aaron.
Yep.
We did open the public hearing, didn't we? No, we opened the public hearing? We'll open the public hearing and welcome you up.
Thank you.
Come on up.
Can I just stand?
You can stand right there as long as you just state your name for the record, and
Yes,
you
she's
gotta,
gotta sign
you gotta
in. She
sign
has to
in,
sign
so
in.
you'll have to come up in front.
Okay. It's Donna Paris. My husband and I are here, Joe and Donna Paris. We live at 34 West Sugar Bowl Road.
Okay?
So we're down the hill
Yep.
from the bluff. And so we came out of concern. That's a pretty steep bank there. And we do get runoff. And I was concerned that, I mean, while it looks like no big deal, I guess my question would be, what if those trees die and others need to be planted? Is there room to do that? We already notice a difference with, down the bottom of that steep hill is a swamp area. And there's also kind of a culvert coming into our property. And that does tend to get water and runoff. And with all the building going on over the years, we have noticed that difference.
Okay.
So the other thing is the support of the bank, where it's very steep, you know, compromising the bank, if you will, could have some impacts. So I just wanted to sort of speak up and say, you know,
Absolutely.
that's
why we're
the
here.
concern that we have. And Joe, did you have anything else to add?
They're not cutting trees,
Nope.
so
Nope, I just wanted it on record.
Sure, yep.
That.
So, can I
that-
ask you a question?
Sure.
So how much drop is there? I mean, is it 50 feet? I mean, I know it's pretty significant, but.
It is pretty significant, and I don't know, I didn't really, you know, the properties meet somewhere in the middle of that.
Yep.
And,
But down to the swampy space, down at the bottom, all the way to the top of the hill, I mean, is it taller than a regular-sized tree, or? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
It's a couple hundred feet, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like 100 something, 130 feet it looks like.
130 feet? Okay,
yeah.
okay. Okay, any questions, Ms. Paris? Thank you very
Thank
much for your
you.
testimony. Anybody else have any questions or concerns regarding this application? Aaron, can you find it back up? So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to
Absolutely.
clarify at all, or?
No, I share the concern and recognize the importance of the
Thank you.
wooded buffer and not disturbing the wooded buffer. And that's why we will only use the area that's already cleared, and to the point, make sure that there is, you know, sufficient space so that we're not harming the trees that are there, or we're not leaving room should a tree need to be replaced.
So runoff is going to go towards the
It does.
Towards the hill.
Yeah, and
And it
this
does now,
project.
right?
Yep, it does now. This project had a net reduction in runoff from the site, because what we've done is basically taking runoff that used to leave on pavement and go into catch basins, and we've taken all of the buildings and infiltrated their runoff and drip edges, and the pavement all went into a gallery. So this phase one of the South End redevelopment decreased the runoff that's going to any pipes that are going off the bluff and out to the river.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? Yes, Jeff?
On that note, so is this sidewalk actually pitched from the buildings toward the bluff?
Correct.
Is there any way for this short section, since you're gonna do landscaping there, is to consider pitching it the opposite way slightly, so the water kind of goes into that landscape buffer you're creating?
We looked at that. We have to have positive pitch from the buildings, and it's only 2%. One of the other things this accomplished was helping us eliminate, we originally had a step down, and given the retirement community, we really were trying to make sure everything had thresholds that were at grade and not have any steps. So this allows us to do that a little bit better. I would prefer to keep the drainage away, especially when snow melts and things, to avoid icing. I do love that they have really well-draining soils, so we'll make sure that there's enough area and maybe even line it with stone so that we know that there's a way for that water to really get into the ground in lieu of running off.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Comments or concerns? No?
Thank you.
Okay, so as part of our package, we've got grant the amendment to the previously approved minor site plan for the relocation of the sidewalk within the Bluff at 33 Christian Avenue. Precedent conditions 1 and 2, subsequent conditions 1, 2, and 3. Oh yes, we need to close the public hearing. Just smack me and tell me to close the public hearing. So we'll close the public hearing. Would someone like to make a motion to grant the amendment with those precedent and subsequent conditions?
So moved.
Second?
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. That is all set. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 6B in our agenda.
Wilcox and Barton, on behalf of 3G Eagle LLC, requests an amendment to a previously approved major site plan for the expansion of 16 parking spaces to accommodate trucks and the construction of 3 additional spaces at 25 Henniker Street in the IN Industrial District.
So we're seeing a trend to amendments to previously approved plans,
I know, it's giving me a bad rap.
Yeah.
I'm doing my best.
making up for other people's issues, right? Okay, can we get a quick staff update? We have seen 25 Henniker Street a number of times in the past, so most of you are familiar with it, but if we could get a quick staff update on what we're doing?
Sure. Not much to add to that. I believe that these 16 parking spaces were originally just car parking spaces. They have been extended to accommodate truck parking based on the tenants that are now occupying the building.
Okay, I don't know if you want to add anything, or I think it's pretty straightforward.
It's pretty straightforward. I just need to add one other thing.
Okay.
So the image that you see does show the area. So yes, 1,700 square feet to convert what were car spaces into truck parking spaces. So they're 10 feet wide, 30 feet deep, rather than 9 by 19. We are adding 3 parking spaces here in order to just provide a couple more parking spaces close to the tenants. The other thing that came up recently, given the fact that winter is upon us, is a lot of times you may have seen this. This is called a snow brush. And what this is it's how a truck would drive through and it brushes the snow off. So it's a safety concern for trucks that are parked. They need to drive through here before they go out onto the road. So I was asked late in the game to locate this on site. So that's the other minor change that I'm asking for is the snow rake is about 14 feet wide, so it would fit here, but then it really limits it to one way. So what we would prefer to do would be have the snow rake and add about 6 feet of pavement. So there really still is a way for a car to drive by and for a truck to drive under. So there's an additional 370 square feet. We will have to relocate this tree as part of that. So I asked to include that in our amendment request.
Oh dear.
I know.
Jeff?
Quick question. You mentioned a truck coming out and a car going in. Can a truck get by in that with the angles that it's designed at?
Yeah, they still can. The majority of the trucks really come in off of Antrim Street. But yes, we will make
forgot you
sure
had that other
that
end.
that's.
Thank you.
Nope, it's very important. I want to make sure that there's nothing precluding all of the users of the building, because there are 3 suites in the building.
So is that snow then removed, plowed off that?
Exactly.
So there's no
Yep.
extra drainage or anything
Correct.
that's going to be...
Yeah, so then it gets cleared and it gets put where we would be storing snow anyway. So instead of it being in the parking lot, it's now here, and it'll have to get removed in that location. So it's an active process when the trucks are leaving.
Okay, any other questions? So we opened the public hearing, so we'll ask the audience if there's any member of the audience have any questions or concerns regarding this? No? So we'll close the public hearing. If someone would like to make a motion to grant the amendment of the previously approved site plan for proposed parking changes and snow, what do you call it? Snow
Snow brush.
brush with some additional space at 25 Henniker Street in the Industrial District with precedent conditions 1 through 5, and subsequent conditions 1, 2, and 3. Sam, anything change as far as that goes, as far as information you need with the additional snow brush and disturbance?
The only comment I would have is that looks like a net increase of 2,000 square feet, so that would be one more tree.
So we are still within our allowable. We
Okay.
need 12 trees and we have 14 proposed.
Great.
So we're good.
And you're relocating one, right?
Yeah, we're gonna relocate that one because I think it will get impacted. So we'll, if we can't replant that one, we'll put in a new one of like kind and size.
Trying to think of what Suzanne would tell me to say about that tree. I can't remember what
Is it a
type
native
of.
I will do everything I can to save it, I
You make
promise.
sure.
We will try to save that tree.
Okay.
Put in a ginkgo tree.
Yeah, don't do that.
I would just suggest that you refer to the plan dated, or whatever the plan as submitted during the
Initial.
December 15th Planning Board meeting, and as confirmed by staff that it meets other requirements, because we haven't had a chance to look at it.
The new plan.
Yeah. We haven't had a chance to,
So can we add that in as a precedent or subsequent condition?
yeah.
Yeah. You
I'll
wanna
move
just-
it, Mr. Chairman, as long as I don't have to repeat it.
I was just gonna say, with whatever Heather just
What
said
she said.
regarding the plan being reviewed by staff. So we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Who was the second?
Motion carries, Matt.
Thank you very
Motion carries.
much.
Thank you very much. We're gonna skip the Turner Group, right? And move on to the next one? No, I'm sorry. 6C, we're gonna read into the record if we could.
H.L. Turner Group, on behalf of Johnny Prescott and Son Oil Company, requesting minor site plan approval to install a 1,750 square foot roof structure at 122 Airport Road in the Industrial District. Staff recommends the application be determined complete, not a development of regional impact, and that we open the public hearing.
Okay, so we've got a determination of completeness component. It's not a development of regional impact. Staff does recommend that we open up the public hearing. Would someone like to make a motion to find the application complete and open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and roundly seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Public hearing is open. Welcome to the table. If you can come on up. If you could state your name for the record.
Sure. Good evening. Bill Hickey with the H.L. Turner Group on behalf of Prescott Oil.
All right, let's get a quick staff update on this one if we could.
Sure, it's a very simple site plan application it's a roof structure, it's an open structure, but it still meets the criteria as a structure, which is why it triggers the minor site plan. They requested waivers to pretty much just provide an existing site plan and show where that's going to be located. They did provide drainage calculations for engineering to review, because that would be our major concern with the addition of the roof structure. And engineering did not have any concerns with that. So we are recommending approval of the site plan and also approval of the waivers for the majority of the application requirements.
I don't see a truck brush on here.
No truck brush. Well, actually, the intent of the roof is the 2 propane trucks, 2 propane delivery trucks, they'll be
Keep
kept
inside.
under cover now, so there won't be a need for snow brush.
Perfect. Again, you've already stated your name for the record. If you could just give us a quick overview of the project and we'll move from there.
So yeah, like that was mentioned, it's going to just be an open-air structure, just a roof only, to park 2 propane trucks under in case of a snowstorm, keep the snow off of them for the winter. Part of what we did is we did a design or drainage analysis of the site to ensure with the additional non-impervious soils or impervious material, there wouldn't be any additional runoff, and that was proven to be true.
Okay, any questions from the board? Comments, concerns? Any member of the audience have any questions, comments, or concerns? Nope. All right, let's move to close the public hearing. Thank you. 2 people's whispering close the public hearing to me. Getting it from all sides. It's perfect. Keep doing it. So we got 2.1 in our packet is to grant the following waivers to the site plan regulations utilizing criteria from RSA 674-44-1, which states that the strict conformity would pose an unnecessary hardship on the applicant. And that's section 12.03 through 12.09 and section 15.01 through 1502. 5, sorry, thank you. Can we take both of them in one approval? And to grant minor site plan approval for the.
I thought you meant both
So we'll do-
waivers,
would
sorry.
someone like to make a motion to grant the following waivers that I so delicately outlined in my first speech
moved.
there.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 2.2 is to grant minor site plan approval for the approval of the proposed 35 by 50-foot steel roofing system at 122 Airport Road. Someone like to make a motion to grant minor site plan approval for that?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries. We are all set. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, let's move on our agenda to 6D.
Richard D. Bartlett and Associates, on behalf of JTA Realty Investments and ATG Corporation, requests minor subdivision approval for a lot line adjustment to annex land from 102 Hall Street to 96 Hall Street in the Opportunity Corridor Performance District. Staff does recommend the application be determined complete, not a development of regional impact, and that you open the public hearing.
Okay, so another determination of completeness. Staff found the application complete, not a development of regional impact. Someone like to make a motion to find the application complete and open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Public hearing is open. Welcome to the table, Mr. Sargent. If you could state your name for the record?
I can, but
We'll
just
come back
trying
to
to
that.
figure
Let's
out
get
what
a-
the heck is
Let's
going
get a quick staff up. Let's get a quick staff update if we could.
Sure, the lot line adjustment, simple, they're increasing the amount of frontage for 96 Hall Street. They have requested some waivers. It's a large, 102 Hall Street is a large property, so they just want to show the wetlands, topography, natural features, to waivers to all of those. They've shown enough information to show that they're not creating any non-conforming lots. So staff supports the waivers. I will point that the technical review comment, there's a few that got carried over from a previous project, which Mark pointed out to me. So the technical review comments do not apply except for noting the waivers.
A little copy and paste there, Beth.
It was too easy. I made it complicated.
Okay. Welcome to the table. If you could state your name for the record?
Well, good evening. My name is Mark Sargent, and I'm with Richard Bartlett and Associates, and I'm here tonight representing JTA Realty Investments and ATG Corporation. The properties that we're talking about this evening are located at 96 Hall Street. That's the JTA parcel. Has a total area of 0.59 acres with 132 feet of frontage, and the lot currently is vacant. The ATG Corp parcel is at 102 Hall Street, has a total area of 10.1 acres with 321.61 feet of frontage, which is divided into two segments. If you look on the plan, one segment is 50.04 feet, and the other one is 271.57, and that lot is also vacant. The proposal before the board this evening is to annex 0.25 acres of the ATG parcel, which is essentially a strip that's that 50-foot wide strip that extends from Hall Street to the back of the JTA parcel. A lot of abbreviations here. And so that would give the new lot area for the JTA parcel of 0.85 acres with a new frontage of 182 feet, and leaves the ATG parcel with 9.85 acres and 271.57 feet of frontage. And if you had any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, I'm having a hard time figuring out where 100 Hall Street is. Where's the building
That's
next to it?
the methadone clinic
Okay.
down there.
All right. Okay, questions, comments, concerns from the board? No? Any member of the audience have any questions or comments regarding this? No? Close the public hearing.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Well, you can stay there if you want. I'm gonna come you right back.
Stay
So,
right here. Well, I think,
so in our packet, 3.1 is to grant the following waivers for the subdivision regulations outlined in outline your packet as number 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm not going to read those in. Would someone like to make a motion to grant those waivers as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Sorry. A frog in my throat. 3.2 is to grant minor subdivision approval for the lot line adjustment to annex 0.5 acres from map 36Z lot 11 to map 37Z lot 12 and 51 and 55 Runnels Road.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Cut and paste
So give
again.
us, if you can give us, if you can give us some reworded, we'll punt here on, we can punt on this if you want, but we can.
Oh,
if you
it's
can-
all
if
the
you
same,
can-
I just have the wrong address.
Okay.
So it's lot 793Z, block 21, lot 793Z, block 23 at 96 and 102 Hall Street.
Okay, subject to the following precedent conditions to be fulfilled within 1 year, and that's outlined in precedent conditions 1 through 7. Would someone like to make a motion to grant minor subdivision approval for that project?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. That is good. You're all
Great.
set.
Thank you.
So we will move on to item 6E in our agenda. If we can read that into the record.
Richard D. Bartlett and Associates on behalf of Douglas and Kathleen Helland? I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. And Matthew and Jennifer Abrams requesting minor subdivision approval for a lot line adjustment to annex land from 51 Runnels Road to 55 Runnels Road in the residential open space district. Staff does recommend the application be determined complete, not a development of regional impact, and the public hearing opened.
Okay, so staff has found the application complete, not a development of regional impact. Someone like to make a motion to find the application complete and open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Okay, we'll get a quick staff update on this if we could. And this is 51 and 55 Ronald Road.
This is the correct report. Oh, sorry. So yeah, this is residential properties, relatively simple lot line adjustment. They're not requesting any waivers. They've already actually submitted revised plans to us, addressing our comments. So I don't have anything else to say, recommending
Okay,
approval.
and it is 36Z, lot 11.
It's the
and
correct,
37.
yes,
Okay,
this one's
all right.
correct.
Okay, questions from the board? Any questions from the board? Anything you want to add?
Oh, my name is Dan Mullen from Richard Bartlett and Associates.
Great.
And if you need me to expand on anything, I will.
He gave you an easy one.
Yep.
Any member of the audience have any questions or concerns regarding this application? Nope, okay, well, let's look right at it. We'll close the public hearing and look to item 3.1, which is the grant minor subdivision approval for the lot line adjustment to annex 0.5 acres from map 36Z lot 11 to map 37Z lot 12 at 51 and 55 Runnels Road, subject to the following precedent conditions, and those are outlined in precedent conditions 1 through 7. Would someone like to make a motion to grant minor subdivision approval as outlined?
So moved.
Motion has been made
Second.
and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. You are all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we got Richard D. Bartlett and Associates again.
They beat
So
Aaron this
read item
month.
6F into the record if we can.
It's like watching a WWF tag team.
Third time in, so he's gonna get.
You watch that, do you, Byron?
All the time.
All right, can we get a quick staff update?
I'll read it into the record if you
Okay, let's read it into the record first. Stepping ahead of myself.
Richard D. Bartlett and Associates LLC on behalf of Patrick J. LaFave and Kelly A. Mulroy request minor subdivision approval for a 3-lot subdivision at 569 Mountain Road in the medium-density residential district. Staff recommends the application be determined complete, not a development of regional impact, and that you open the public hearing.
Okay, so we've got a determination of completeness component, and staff has found the applicant complete and not a development of regional impact. Someone like to make a motion to find the application complete and open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries. Public hearing is open. Welcome to the table. If you could state your name for the record.
Thank you. My name is Mark Sargent. I'm with Richard Bartlett and Associates, and I'm here
right.
tonight representing the LaFaves. As stated, the property is located at 569 Mountain Road, has a total area of 6.3 acres with 699.9 feet of frontage on Mountain Road. The parcel currently has a single-family home on it, and Burnham Brook traverses through the parcel. The proposal before the board this evening is to create 2 additional lots. The first lot, located right in the middle, would have an area of .92 acres with 200 feet of frontage, 33,344 square feet of buildable area, where 20,000 is required. Lot 2, the south end of the parcel, 1.06 acres, 236 feet of frontage, 20,346 square feet of buildable area. The remaining parcel with the existing home would be 4.32 acres with 263.9 feet of frontage, 66,630 square feet of buildable area. We have applied for, this is a state-maintained road. We have applied for our driveway permits. I have not received those yet, and we still need to receive our state subdivision approval. But I don't see any issues with either one of those. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, questions from the board? So this is way at the end of Mountain Road, right? I mean,
Yeah,
almost into
it's
Canterbury.
close to the town line.
Like Canterbury, yeah.
Right?
It's right
almost
across
there.
from Apple Hill Farm.
Yeah.
Did I see a hand go up?
I have
Yes,
one
Matt.
question. Why no shared driveways? I'm curious.
Shared driveways, Matt, just aren't very appealing to. We've looked at this, and of course, there's always, when you're adding 2 driveways with a state road, there's always that question. And we meet all the criteria to have the 2 driveways. There hasn't been any additional driveways created on this parcel since '71, and it meets the frontage requirements and such, so it's.
They just don't want to.
They don't, and, I've left it at such, and LaFave's say, if the state comes back and says, we can't get 2 driveways, we'll just do 1 lot, so we'll come back to the board.
I don't really, it doesn't matter to me, I'm just curious, thanks.
There's no there's no grade issues, is there? It's
It
pretty
is flat as a
at that-
board through there, and you can see from that point all the way down to the intersection with Hoyt Road, which is over 1,200 feet away, and all the way up. So, we had to do line of sight profiles as part of this. The state requirement is you have to have a 400-foot either direction, clear line of sight, and we greatly exceed that.
Okay. Jeff?
He was kind of going to my point, Mr. Chairman. Did you actually look at the existing driveway in terms of sight lines? Because I know that is a condition of DOT as well.
We did too, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Any member of the audience have any questions or concerns about this application? No? We'll close the public hearing and look to our magic sheet. 51 Reynolds Road, what? No kidding. So 3.1 is to grant the waiver to section 12.083 for topography. Would someone like to make a motion to grant that waiver as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 3.2 is to grant minor subdivision approval for a 3-lot subdivision at 569 Mountain Road, subject to the following precedent and subsequent conditions outlined in precedent conditions 1 through 7, 8, 9, and subsequent conditions 1A and 1, and then A and B as well. Would someone like to make a motion to grant minor subdivision approval as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. You
Great.
are all set.
Well, thank you. And I hope
Stay
you
for the
all
next one.
have a wonderful holiday.
Yeah, thank you. You too, Mark.
Happy New Year.
All right, let's move on to item 6G in our agenda. If we could read that into the record.
TF Moran Incorporated, on behalf of Perry William H. Family Trust and Perry Barbara M. Trust, requests comprehensive development plan and major site plan approval for a multifamily residential development consisting of approximately 123 two-bedroom units and 3 three-story buildings. Also requested are 3 conditional use permits to allow a residential development without a commercial component in a GWP district, to allow construction of fewer parking spaces than are required, and to allow less than the required separation between driveways, along with associated site improvements for property off of Pembroke Road in the Gateway Performance District. The application was previously determined complete, not a development of regional impact, and we recommend you open the public hearing.
Okay, so we'll open the public hearing. We'll get a quick staff update. If you guys want to just sign in on the sign-in sheet, we'll welcome you in just a sec. If we could get a staff update.
Sure.
So this has been a great project, a lot of moving pieces, as you heard in the intro, quite a few conditional use permits, a few waivers. We had an added challenge of a water main transecting this property. So as part of this, we needed to work with the applicants to update the easement. This is the city's water main, and they were great to work with. We were able to relocate the driveway. The main concern was if this is a single access site, so if the water main by chance broke under the driveway, you wouldn't have access to the site. So we were able to work with the applicant to relocate the driveway so that won't be a concern. You would have access around the water main should there be a break. So they were great to work with on that. Relative to the conditional use permits, as Heather mentioned, this isn't the Gateway Performance District where typically a commercial component is required. Given the nature of the site, the characteristics of the buildings proposed, it made sense to waive that requirement, and we certainly do need workforce housing within the city, so we did not want to throw up a barrier to that. The applicant is requesting a waiver to construct fewer parking spaces. We see the CUP fairly often. They have provided a plan which would show full build out, and the drainage works, everything works out, so we're supporting that as well. We have also received a conditional use permit for driveway separations. This filling a gap between a couple of lots on Sheep Davis and then the Bektash Shriners Temple. The lot is very long and not as wide, so that's why we're running into this CUP. We've worked with them, again, relative to the driveway and locating it across from Industrial Park Ave, or Drive, as best we could. In regards to the waivers, signage coming at a later date, we do that fairly often. We've also talked, and I can let engineering speak to this further if needed, relative to stormwater recharge. This is up on the heights, so sandy soils, but the groundwater table is rather high. I believe they meet AOT specs, but the city standards are more stringent. We have granted this waiver in the past, but again, engineering can speak to that a little bit further. A quick update on architecture design review comments. There were quite a few. ADR had concerns about the character of the development and ensuring that residents would have a quality development to live in. Given the narrow layout of the lot, it created an issue where the buildings were relatively close together. I think we had about 50 feet separation at the narrowest point, and with the orientation of the buildings, they were worried about the center courtyard being in shade quite a bit, and the space within there, there is a kind of a patio area and a play area for kids just north of the southernmost building, but the courtyard beyond that is unprogrammed. So ADR had some recommendations that some trees be thrown in there just for some visual interest, but also to provide some privacy screening, cross visuals. It's over, only 50 feet. They were hoping to see a little bit of a break up there. And then just that the drainage reflects, because it is a challenging site. It is very flat. The drains, and Nick can certainly speak to that, it's a little bit interesting. But it all looks like it works out. And again, great project to work on, and certainly need some workforce housing.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sam. If you guys could state your names for the record.
Certainly. My name is Nick Golan, licensed engineer and principal at TF Moran.
Joe Tamposi from Brookline Opportunities LLC.
And Vernon Apgar from Market Square Architects.
Great. Welcome to the table. And Nick, if you could run us through the project.
All right. Actually, before I get going, Joe's just going to give a brief little presentation as to his desire to move forward with this project. To do it.
Absolutely. Great.
Absolutely. No, thank you, everyone. Just to start off, I wanted to say how much we appreciate the opportunity to be before this board tonight, proposing this project. As was mentioned, it's 123 units in the Gateway Performance District on about a 10.8 acre site. All of the 123 units for this site will be designated as affordable to people making 60% or less of the area median income. The need for workforce housing in Concord and Merrimack County is huge. In Merrimack County, the vacancy rate is 0.4%. So just to put that in perspective, typical housing market, the vacancy rate's about 5%. So there's tremendous demand for housing, and particularly workforce housing. As I mentioned, we're very excited to be proposing this opportunity. Our design team at TF Moran and Market Square Architects have put together a really beautiful plan for this site, something that works, something that's reasonable, something that will create a great product for the future residents. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nick.
Thank you, Joe. All right, relative to the parcel in question, this is tax map 622Z, lot 1, comprised of approximately 10 acres with 559 feet of frontage along Pembroke Road. Just relative to getting us situated within the city, this is one of the easterly-most lots on Pembroke Road. There's one lot that separates us and Sheep Davis, and as mentioned in the opening, our driveway is situated directly across from Industrial Park Drive. The proposal itself, 123 multifamily units. As noted again in the opening, there will be a CUP for a residential use only. The units themselves are scattered across 3 buildings, Building 1 consisting of 39 units, Buildings 2 and 3, 42 units each. If I may, I want to talk a little bit about our existing conditions, and we'll get right into the site plan itself, as this was a bit of a daunting property. Extremely flat. There's no more than about 1.5 feet of grade change across the entire property. For the vast majority of it, it drains interior to the property, with the exception of a small section that drains to Pembroke Road within an existing drainage easement and then to the southeast. One of the predominant features, we'll say, relative to the property is an existing easement bisecting the southeast quadrant. This contains an existing telephone line as well as the before-mentioned city water line. Our original proposal had cited our driveway along the westerly side of this property. We thought it was a benefit relative to increasing sight lines, getting ourselves further away from Sheep Davis Road. But through the course of the review of this project, it was determined that relocating the driveway was really in not only the city's best interest, but also the applicant's best interests, and as such, we have done so. Other components of this property, and this was actually mentioned before as well, there's a fairly high groundwater table, which you wouldn't expect within this portion of the city. It's about 4.5 feet down. And what that means is in order to get separation from the estimated seasonal high groundwater with our stormwater treatment practices, we're essentially filling in certain areas in order to get that separation. So when I get to the component of explaining this drainage system for this site, you'll note that it's almost primarily all open flow drainage. There is no real closed drainage system associated with this, so we had to break up the site into small little pieces so that we would have the opportunity to provide effective drainage. All right, knowing that that is our site, let's talk a little bit about our layout. Access to the property is proposed via a 24-foot driveway from Pembroke Road. You can see the various elements of the site. There is a larger parking field located directly in front of Building 1. As we work our way to the northerly end or the rear portion of the site, you can see the proposed parking along the east and west sides of Buildings 2 and 3. These lighter gray scaled areas represent areas of future potential parking. This actually works out really well from a phase perspective. We looked at a couple of different elements as to how that parking could be sited. There was one component where it would potentially be located along the north side, but when you look at phasing that construction, it really created some concerns, not only with our drainage system, but how it could potentially negatively impact the use of the property during the construction of those parking spaces. So essentially, from a design standpoint, it gives us the opportunity to grade those areas out, loam them, seed them, and should they ever need that additional parking, it's as easy as removing that loam and being able to pave those parking spaces. You'll see there is an interconnecting component of sidewalks throughout the property. One addition that we'll be making to this plan, the request of city engineering, which was a good suggestion, we do have a dog park that's located along the northern portion of the site. Currently, there's parking on either side without a direct access route. We will be blocking off a space on either side, relocating those spaces elsewhere, and then providing a nice little crosswalk. So that way people have ease of access to the area of the dog park. Sidewalks, there was originally a waiver request in regards to providing a sidewalk from the development to Pembroke Road. That has since been withdrawn, and that sidewalk is now being provided. One of the waivers that was noted within this package is in regards to essentially a future sidewalk along Pembroke Road. I know this is something planning boards deal with a lot, as do planning staffs, determining when is the right time to build sidewalks along city streets. There are a few encumbrances concerning existing utility poles, drainage easements along this section of Pembroke Road, which make it very difficult to build a sidewalk at this time. So what we've tried to do is provide an alternative means to provide that sidewalk. And in this case, would grant a 10-foot easement to the city so that that sidewalk could be built at a future date, such that we wouldn't end up with a fragmented sidewalk just along our frontage, giving the city really the ample opportunity to achieve the vision of the master plan to continue to have sidewalk along Pembroke Road. If we look around at the immediate vicinity, and I think it's noted within the staff report, the closest sidewalk is approximately a mile away, down at 70 Pembroke Road and at the intersection of Canterbury. So there's a fair amount of distance between existing sidewalks. So we're hopeful this is a good solution in order to provide the future needs relative to the sidewalk on Pembroke Road. Relative to landscaping, you'll see our plan is quite green, and that is very much purposeful. We talked about the clear distance between those buildings being approximately 50 feet at its narrowest point. The site layout is condensed and that is purposeful. Natural Heritage Bureau had a list of concerns relative to rare and endangered species, both plants, vertebrate and invertebrate. Primarily, one of the greatest concerns is the pitch pine scrub oak woodland that surrounds the property, and trying to preserve as much of that as possible is a focal point of the project, as Natural Heritage Bureau does have to issue an approval in association with this project. So you can see from a layout standpoint, there's also a residential project. We do have commercial butters. We've tried to maintain an appropriate vegetated buffer both along our east, west, and north sides. And then, or I should say along the southerly end, you can see where we really have a larger enhanced buffer as we approach towards Sheep Davis Road. Relative to another element of our landscape plan, there is a conservation wildlife seed mix that really consists of the entire perimeter of the property. So from the edge of our pavement to the tree line, we're using this conservation mix. This is associated with some of the critters that were found out there. We have a host of butterflies and dragonflies that are on that rare and endangered species list. This type of seed mix will really help the ecology of the area, and it was a recommendation of Natural Heritage Bureau. From a site lighting standpoint, we will have wall-mounted lights on the fronts and backs of all buildings and also at our access points. So the interior courtyard area will be lit. Site light poles will be located throughout the parking lot to provide appropriate emergency access and egress. Dumpster pads have been located appropriately for ease of access and in good locations relative to each one of the buildings, and will be screened appropriately with landscaping and vegetation. From a utility standpoint, so we have municipal water, municipal sewer, electric, and gas that will all service this property. Given that we have an existing water line that runs right through a corner of our site, that provides a pretty good means of access. I mentioned I would speak to drainage. So what we have done is created small pocket areas called bioretention areas or rain gardens that will provide the stormwater treatment for this site. We've broken up the totality of the site into small portions, no more than 20,000 square feet, which will drain to these areas. There'll be a sediment forebay that it provides our pretreatment before it overflows into the larger bioretention cell, where the engineered soils that are provided within that provide an appropriate biological uptake and treat that stormwater before it has the opportunity to recharge. One of the benefits of these systems is it allows for a shallower depth to groundwater because you're relying on the engineered soils to provide your treatment, which is why it provides a nice benefit for this specific site. The other component of the project relative to drainage is there is a series of leaching catch basins that are located within the courtyard. The buildings will have downspouts with gutters, so we will have downspout discharges along the back of the building so that we don't have any issues with flooding or otherwise. These leaching catch basins provide the opportunity for a recharge of that stormwater during all seasons. And then also there's an overflow pipe which is perforated, which would ultimately discharge to the northerly end of the site where we have a oversized bioretention area, again for that purpose of treating our stormwater. What else would we like to talk about? From a traffic standpoint, the impacts for this project are fairly minimal. It's my understanding we have come to consensus with the city's traffic reviewer. I don't believe there's any outstanding comments. I believe their comments primarily were typographical, and the other comment they had as part of the original submittal was really providing further definition as to why the driveway was located where it was, being that that driveway has shifted. That becomes somewhat of a moot point. To that end, I'll kind of close the portion of the discussion relative to site plan and pass it to our architect to speak to our building. Is there an opportunity to plug in a flash drive so we can show the current photos here? Sure. I want to make sure I
Should be one right on there.
don't disconnect something that belongs. Yeah, we can get in there.
Try the other side.
We're all full there. There we go. All right. I'll get it open, Vernon. You want to go ahead?
All right, so we have 3 buildings on the site. Building 1 is the northernmost building with the amenity space in it, and the back 2 buildings, 2 and 3, are essentially the same building with different accent colors. So we have the 3 of the same colors on each building would be the tan, blue, and white. And for wayfinding, we have 3 different colors on the buildings, which would be red, blue, and green, just for wayfinding. The building meets our height requirement of 45 feet at 43 feet, about 8 inches. So we're all set in that regard. All the siding would be vinyl with PVC style trim rather than vinyl siding trim. So we're going to be using like actual AZAC products rather than vinyl trim pieces and J channels and things like that, and also vinyl windows. The ADR mentioned increasing the size of the entrances and having roofs over all of the entrances on the building. So that is something that these updated elevations take into consideration, with all the entrances having roofs over them, including the emergency exits. You guys have any questions?
Can you go back to that elevation? Is that the parking side up top there, the one you just showed with the emergency exit, and is that the parking side or the courtyard side?
The bottom elevation there?
The top elevation.
The top elevation is the courtyard side.
Courtyard side, and the bottom elevation is the side from the parking area.
Correct. Yeah.
Is that one of the side buildings, or is that the front building?
That is the front building.
That's the front building. Do you have the side buildings similar?
Yep, so the next 2 sheets are both the side buildings. They're essentially the same, with the exception of the accent color, blue versus red. And
so the front of the building's not on the bottom at this time, the front of the building's on the top, right? I'm getting to the point I was getting to is the courtyard, the doors into the courtyard?
Yep.
Just one on the bottom there?
Yep, so can you scroll back up to the site plan? So each of the buildings have a back courtyard entrance, and then the back 2 buildings, building 2 and 3, have a entrance on the end of the building to more easily access that back parking. We were trying to not have the entrances on the inside of the courtyard, so that way people wouldn't be walking directly past residents' windows on the first floor.
If I understand correctly, the bedrooms are located on those back sides as well, so.
Yeah, they're built, all 3 buildings are double loaded, so there's bedrooms on all the exterior walls.
Central hallway?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, elevators?
Yes. All 3 buildings, and then the front building has the amenity space in it.
How are you, what is the intent of the courtyard space? Like, how do you intend for that? Is it just aesthetic? Is it intended to be used at all, or?
More like an open play space for residents with kids to have them be able to play in the courtyard or relax, put lawn chairs out there. Or we also have a playground space, a patio space, and a fire pit in the more central
courtyard?
So there's really two elements, right? There's a defined space, which really represents this quadrant that's located between the three buildings, where there's a fire pit, a pergola, and a play area. Then as we work our way north, this is undefined, and this was one of the kind of sticking points with ADRs, that our intent was for it to be undefined, to provide that general play space. They were looking for something a little more descript, relative to providing additional tree plantings, additional foundation plantings, so that we could better address, I believe the terminology was the human element, so that they could better enjoy the space in between those buildings. If that's something that the planning board would like to see as well, that's certainly something that we can incorporate.
My initial thought when I looked at it was that there should be more features on that side of the building, aesthetic features such as entrances to both activate the space and provide sort of more pedestrian connection through there. I'm sympathetic to some of the things that you're saying, but I do think it looks pretty stark, pretty austere. I think some foundation plantings, even some larger shrubs. I'm not talking about like annuals that could get stomped or trampled rather, but maybe some evergreen shrubs or some larger shrubs that would really just help provide some screening for those windows. I had envisioned sort of a walkway sort of through the center, just sort of to say, hey, this is a space for people. But, if you want it to be like a sort of a place to throw a football or, whatever.
Kind of complicates it if there's a sidewalk through the middle.
Right. So, I'm sympathetic to that. But I think you can do more with that space to make it more activated and more friendly. I'm not sure if there's value in providing more. My impression would be, my intuition would be that there would be more value in providing more pedestrian. So, for instance, around the side of the, is that the south? Or something right there?
This is the more defined space, and then as we work our way north, we have entranceways here to the building, and then sidewalk along the parking lot.
Put it in my hand the right way so I make it work the right way. And turn it on, thank you. Wow.
The technology.
Would you like me to point to something?
Yes, could you point to? Is it working?
Yes, push the button.
So like
Don't
if
put it at me.
there's some connection, value in sort of, I don't know, whenever I see a building with just no sidewalk there, I always think that seems like an inhospitable place. So I don't know if there's value in providing any more connections to create, like for the instance of the wintertime, might somebody want to, whatever, I don't know.
Well, your idea for the evergreens along the foundations, it makes a lot of sense. Because
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
stark aspect, I could
Yeah.
see, even if you're out there kicking around a soccer ball, exposed foundation underneath the siding.
Sure.
There's no reason why we can't provide something like that. And the reality is it really doesn't obscure the ability to use that space for that purpose.
Yeah.
The idea of providing, say, an interconnecting sidewalk right down the middle, or providing a bunch of trees in the middle of the courtyard,
Yeah.
would deter us from that purpose.
So I think, looking closely at the species could really make an influence. You could just provide some evergreens would be nice for some foundations, but there's some hardy deciduous like winterberry or something like that. Some larger accent pieces you could put in
And
locations.
we're using that elsewhere on the site, so it would
Oh,
actually
good.
tie in very nicely.
Good, yeah. So just throw in some color back there. I'm not sure, we don't have a whole lot of room, but just something to make it a little more inviting, I think.
That can certainly be accomplished.
Thank you.
Yes, that was exactly what I mean, looking at it, you look like you want to have a sidewalk right down through the middle of it to kind of connect, but again, I think there is some appeal to having open space for kids to play and not have a sidewalk down through the middle of it. But with the trees, if the trees and the plantings are on the left and the right side and not down the middle, I do have some concerns that there's not another entrance on the bottom, but again, you're putting them all the way through across, left to right. If you put in another door in, you lose a unit. So I get that. I understand that. Questions, Jeff? Oh, Carol?
Well, I'm sensitive to the losing a unit also, but I feel like at the north end of the two buildings, it would really make a difference to be able to connect those two buildings with a pedestrian. I mean, if there are kids who have friends in the other building, they've got
You know they're gonna cut right across there, they're not gonna go across that sidewalk.
Right.
There's not a kid in the building that's gonna.
Well, the
walk
reality is if they're going to play football, I'm doing the same
You're
thing.
gonna
I'm
cut
running
right
across the
around
grass. That's why
you're
it's
gonna cut
there.
Right around the grass. and you're
So it
gonna
becomes
go
a
across.
question, do you need a sidewalk to direct people towards that centralized area if it's supposed to be open? Where you see more on the southerly area, that is provided, because you are trying to define a space to be used by people as well as to define how they get there. Whether they be coming from that central corridor, which is fairly aligned to the amenity space within the building, and then equally that you have an access here along the southerly portions of these buildings. And then the northerly end would also have that opportunity where you have access to this north side. So it essentially splits the difference as far as the distance between them.
And that's enough doors for emergency?
Yes, we meet all of the egress requirements.
Shocking, isn't it? You didn't think it would be.
It just
I think there needs to be more,
feels
especially with
like
the
there need to be
elevations.
more doors.
Yeah, the
but-
elevations make it feel that way too.
I think, like, through there, maybe is what you were thinking.
Yeah.
Something through there. I kind of want to point something out that is easy to overlook because of the changes that we've been making in the code and trying to promote housing and promote alternative types of development. So this district normally would not allow multifamily housing. So the multifamily housing standards, design standards, exempt performance districts. And that's because no performance districts previously allowed multifamily housing. So in those districts that allowed this type of housing, there was a limit on the length of the buildings to 160 feet. So sort of inadvertently, through us not really paying attention to that when we did that amendment, I don't mind admitting, there is no restriction on the length of the building here. But just, please realize that this type of development was intended to require a variance to have a building that long. So I think that asking for a door connection there is sort of consistent with the spirit intent for buildings not to be this long. If you'd had to comply with those multifamily standards, there would be 160 feet, it would be half as big. And so you might have more walkways by virtue of, I mean, it's kind of nice that you have such a large space there, but it's also a bit of a oversight on our part when amending this district to allow this use, which we did, again, in advance of the zoning code updates being completed in time for all of these projects that we're really excited to get. For what that's worth.
For what it's worth. And again, just keep coming back to losing a unit, you know, you're on a razor's edge and you lose a unit. And again, you lose a unit on one floor. So if you come in from the back courtyard and you have a back entrance, say where that yellow space is right there, you're gonna come in and then you're gonna have to go left or right to get to the stairs or get to the elevator. As opposed to going around the building. And again, going down to the end and getting right in and going from there. Carol?
I had a couple other questions, one of which is, I'm assuming that all of the lighting that you mentioned would be full cutoff?
Of course.
And is there public transportation over there?
Yes.
And has there been any thought to a,
Cut in. Bus stop type thing.
well, a bus shelter thing at the end of the driveway?
For the kiddos.
It was something that we discussed. It was not taken beyond a discussion point, though. Yes, there is a bus route through there. I'm not aware of the closest one. Is it down to 70 Pembroke? It's the closest one.
I don't know.
Yeah, right next to the school. Yeah,
So it's quite a ways.
yeah.
However, that might change when this is built.
If there's people there that will use it, they'll change.
It's definitely one of my questions I brought up last month when they were in here.
Was
and
bus.
I continue to believe that there should be a bus stop at this location. We're talking workforce housing, you may have families that have multiple people with maybe only one vehicle, and so in order to be able to have those people be able to get to work and whatnot, I think if we have the public transit there, a bus stop should be put, and if it needs to be on the opposite side of the road because of the way the route runs, then there should be a crosswalk with an ADA acceptable ramp and waiting area. Even if it's, whether it's a full shelter or a pad area where they can wait, that can be up for further discussion, but I agree with you, Carol, there definitely has to be connection to public transit here.
Yeah.
To that end, if that's something the board's comfortable with us working through with staff as to whether or not that
Yeah,
can
I
be
don't know that we
accomplished.
can dictate public transportation. I think it's a sticky issue where we've got to be careful in making it a condition of approval, other than the fact that we'd like to see a bus stop there. And again, I think if you build it, they will come type of thing, where if there's 123 units, 130 units that are all potential customers of the CAT system, they'll be driving down the road. The question is where they're going to come. You know, they're going to stop right in front of the entrance, or are they going to pull a little farther along, or is there going to be a spot there that we'll be able to have a waiting area?
Well, if it's something that the board as a whole feels is important, I would think that not so much as a condition of approval, but the board could state that to ask staff and the applicant to continue to explore that opportunity for this property.
I can see Sam writing it down now as we go, so he's ready to
mental note.
Put that in. I have a question. I'm sorry, Carol, go ahead.
Well, just that there will be school bus needs for accommodation as
Yeah,
well.
that's right. Right away, immediately.
From a turning radius standpoint, we accommodate those turns. So if there's a bus that's pulling into this, it's the same size essentially as your fire truck, and
So
all those
bus,
turns.
you're envisioning a bus pulling into the lot or pulling up on public
That's a tough
property?
question to answer. I don't know that
I
we've.
think they pull up to the end of the
I think the
streets.
reality is it can be accommodated relative to turning movements within the site, but relative to how they determine for that bus stop to work, I guess we would leave it to those folks.
I think somebody's going to answer for you behind you there.
Right now, the bus is turning around in our dooryard at the shrine.
Okay.
So
There's
it
nobody
would
else.
have to go, it would have to go further beyond where it goes anyway.
And turn around. Okay, thank you. Yeah. And is it coming, sorry, and we'll catch your name in just a sec, but is it coming from the city proper, or is it coming from it's coming from the city proper up?
City proper pulls in, does our loop in the front and back out.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for that.
Ultimately, it's up to the school district.
I think we've got some transportation, hang on, we'll come back to you in just a sec. I think we've got some concerns on the transportation and the bus movement, the CAT movement, the school bus movement, the transportation for CAT, or alternatives on that. And we'll hit the public testimony in just a sec. Are you all set? I've got a question on the coming out of the property as the new driveway, because again, we're up on the other end of the driveway when we looked at it before. So coming up, you've got a wind and then you come out. It's not a direct shot across to Industrial Drive? Is that by
It actually
design?
is. So the westerlymost edge of our edge of pavement is directly aligned with the westerlymost edge of the inbound lane on Industrial Park Drive. So it is the shortest distance between 2 points.
Okay.
I know Jeff will want to talk about
I have some more comment on that. I would somewhat disagree. Yes, your edge pavements meet, but if you look at the two center lines, if you're coming from Industrial Park Drive, if you left and followed kind of that center line shot, you'd run right over the curb on the eastern side of your driveway. So if you bring up the site distance plans, probably it might be the easiest one to see because you actually have it laid out with industrial.
Let the computer think.
Sheet 11.
Yeah, we'll let the computer think.
That was 9 of 18? What's 9 of 18? That's got site
I have
distance in it
11
as
of
well.
20, so,
You were 11 of 20?
yeah. So if you actually were to extend the center line from Industrial Drive directly across, it ends up in the middle of the inbound lane on the opposite side. So while the edge of it is, because Industrial Drive is wider and the lanes are wider, you're actually not directly. So theoretically, that driveway needs to be shifted further west so it's further east so the two center lines line up. That would be the better alignment if you want to be directly across.
So my concern on doing that was, the reason I asked was by design, is it because of the distance to the streetlights, which I think is you got plenty of room, or is it buffer, or is it lot line, or?
Combination of elements relative to location of utilities, both existing and proposed. You'll note.
Plus, again, you don't want a straight line, you don't want a straight line coming in and going down through the lot, through the parking lot.
Correct. The curvature of the road also promotes the ability for people to slow down, which we think is, I think, something that's also equally important. But overall, we thought the geometry as presented was appropriate. It was reviewed with VHB, who was the third-party review consultant. They felt that it was appropriate as well. We reviewed with city staff, and they also felt that it was appropriate. It also helps relative to turning movements, relative to those exiting movements. I know this is something we could probably debate for a while. Jeff, you're going to have your points of merit. I think we have our points of merit. It's one of those ones I feel like more of a coin flip as to which direction you go. One of the things we did look at, though, is also the existing utility infrastructure that is on the road. There are several utility poles that are located in close proximity, one of which has multiple transformers on it and was a recently replaced pole, which would be an extreme expense to the applicant to relocate. So in that this driveway's location provides appropriate site distance, it provides for the appropriate health and safety of those using the intersection. We felt it was appropriate and it was unnecessary to shift the driveway over at the expense of having to relocate a utility pole as well.
So I'm guessing, if I had to guess, I'm guessing that if I lived there and wanted to go downtown, I would go across that street and go down Industrial Drive and take a right on Regional Drive to get there. I wouldn't go down Pembroke Road. I probably wouldn't take a left, go to the lights, go down Sheep Davis Road either way.
The alignment provides what we would envision to be the most logical turning movements that are going to be most regularly taken.
Okay. Any traffic information as far as the volume of traffic on that road?
Sure. As far as peak trips that we want to talk about, or just in general?
I just have a question. I just want to follow up on something.
Oh, hang on. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right, so just relative to the project generates 44 trips in the AM hour and 54 in the peak hour, 58 during the Saturday peak hour, so we're talking less than 1 new trip per minute. As part of the traffic survey that was done, the evaluation of the existing intersection, we're actually able to direct the camera, so we were able to look down Pembroke Road and evaluate queuing on Sheep Davis. Okay. Queuing was not an issue on this property, so that was another one of the reasons why we felt comfortable with shifting this driveway closer to Sheep Davis versus its previous location along the westerly edge. But the proposed driveway operates in favorable conditions A and B under all operations. And overall delays with an increase of only a second or less, and queues increased by less than 1 car length in both the opening and future years. So, relative to this intensity, it's very small in the large scheme of things.
Okay. And to be fair, I asked the first question, so
No,
I'll give it back to you.
No, keep
ahead.
going.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I guess you're right, Nick. We'll agree to disagree, because if I look at the site plan, the site distance, that telephone pole, if you made the shift, would not be impacted by the shift further east. The other thing is, you mentioned site distance. You might want to take another look. Your site distance as drawn does not follow AASHTO. You're using the 3-foot 9-inch height and 10 feet off roadway, which is the DOT standard. It should be the 3.5 and the 14-foot setback. So I request that you update that and just coordinate with staff to make a final review on that.
Certainly.
It's a different language.
I know.
Yeah, I've tried to discuss it with DOT over the years because of the way it is, but it's written into a law, so it's very tricky to adjust.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns?
I still, like I said, I still think we should strongly consider the bus as part of an approval if it's appropriate, not as just a condition to try and see if it can be done. I'm really concerned with the whole idea of whether it's school children or whatnot. There's plenty of right-of-way on the other side of the road because this road is shifted almost all the way to the site, so it does not appear to be an issue. Now that the driveway is aligned directly across from industrial, the idea of putting a crosswalk across Pembroke Road at that location, providing the document is more consistent because you expect a crosswalk near an intersection.
I think the school bus issue to me is a bigger issue than the public transportation issue, and if truly it's a turnaround spot at the Shrine now, and they're just gonna shift that to turn around in this lot, then it may be an issue that needs to be addressed inside the space to make sure that they've got, hey, this is where the bus is gonna come and pick everybody up for school in the back of the lot, or wherever it might be, where they can turn around safely and not have them up in the front of the lot, backing out onto Pembroke Road.
Right.
So if then we can direct staff to work with the applicant to say, we want to make sure we've got a safe bus area for school bus pickup right out of the gate, because we know that's gonna be instant issue. Recommend that it be in the back somewhere, or somewhere out of the main thoroughfare, or into the middle of the parking lot somewhere that they can. I mean, if you do it in the middle of the parking lot, you got places to stand and out of the way and out of the traffic and all that, so.
An alternative is they could have the bus stop on the opposite side of the road and make a right and do
And
some
it's a
sort of
problem,
turnaround
yeah.
on industrial as well.
Right,
So
and then,
I think that's
yeah.
may have to work with the school district to find out what's the most appropriate and
is the issue,
feasible for
yeah.
them.
Yeah, that was gonna be my point, is that the school
talk to the
district
school district.
ultimately gonna make that decision.
And
So
determine
yeah.
where they do it. So I guess the direction will be to let staff work with the applicant to make sure that the school issue is addressed, but the bigger issue I think on our issues is CAT gonna access it, and is it gonna be on this side of the street or that side of the street, and then does it put in a sidewalk at that point, so. And again, I think we can direct staff to work with you guys on that.
Happy to do so.
So I had a couple of questions. So snow removal? You mentioned it's a flat lot. Is it all on site? You're not going to be removing snow? You're just going to be plowing to the backs?
Yep, so we've allocated space on the property, on the site plans to appropriately accommodate snow storage.
Okay. So the bicycle storage, all of the fun stuff, I mean, if we
Got
thought
it.
about bikes and,
Yep, we've got bike racks at each primary entrance point.
okay,
And the city-approved detail, which I think we finally got right on the plan set.
okay. Handicap accessible?
Yep. The required number of accessible spaces are provided. We have located them throughout the property, so that way there are multiple points of access, depending on what people's units are.
Okay. And will Suzanne Smith Myers approve the landscape plan based on looking at what the trees are you're gonna be putting on there? I'm gonna catch hell if we don't have appropriate trees.
We
and
have
shade
certainly
trees.
provided the appropriate percentages.
Percentages are good. Make sure they're the right type of trees. Shade trees we love.
Right. Now, we have provided a nice diversity. We've got maples, oaks, elms, and the combination of having the interior courtyard area basically being loam and seed, and then a conservation mix at the perimeter, it does provide nice contrast.
What was the tree, the pine pitch something, what was that?
Pitch pine.
Pitch pine?
I write it down because I always mix up the words. Pitch pine, scrub oak,
Scrub
woodland.
oak, okay. Endangered?
Yes.
Who knew? Okay, I think that was it. Courtyard doors, yeah, I'm all set on that. Any other questions, Jeff?
I just had one, you talked about ADA spaces. I noticed the ADA spaces are not the closest to your doors on the two side buildings. I believe ADA does request that they are the shortest route from the entrance, which would put them right as you come out the walkway.
So there's some ambiguity relative to the way those regulations are written. I believe it does meet ADA requirements relative to travel distance, because you are not going to have a tip down directly in front of the sidewalk. Our architect, I believe, is also very ADA affluent. Myself, as a handicapped individual, I take a personal interest in those requirements as well. I will be sure to double check that, though, to make sure that they are appropriately located.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from staff or the board? All right, we'll have you guys step back if we can. I think we've probably got some people who want to speak on this. Okay. Any member of the audience wish to speak? Come on up, sir. If you could just sign in and state your name for the record.
Jesus. Name's William Hebert. I'm the treasurer for the Shriners at 189 Pembroke Road. Our main concern is the reduction in the parking spaces. We have a big parking lot, and it's not a long way to walk through the woods.
Okay.
Trails get developed pretty quickly. I can see our parking lot becoming a place for overflow parking.
Okay.
Ideally, when we discussed it at the board meeting the other night, ideally, we would like to see a right-of-way fence put up through on the property line. Just deter that from going through, plus to deter there's not much space for people to do stuff here, and I can foresee our property becoming a playground. Much as Shriners love children, our insurance company would not love.
Right.
Us becoming a playground.
Okay.
We're okay with the reduction. We understand with, the driveway, the separation and stuff, we're okay with that. But our big concern is, especially this time of year with holidays and stuff, that we would be getting any overflow parking, because granted, they got 2 spaces per unit. If it was ideal and that's what they had, they don't have that.
Yep.
When families start visiting, they're gonna wanna park somewhere. And when we're having stuff at our building, it's our parking.
Sure.
And, again, it's another insurance with winter weather and stuff, it's another liability.
Okay. Any other concerns?
No, I would hope to see that. I think a bus stop somewhere in there would be good. And I think you kind of hit it on the head with where you should be lining that up, because when they're backed up at night on 106 at the light, everybody's gonna be wanting to go across and go down to the next light.
Right.
And I can see it being a real bottleneck there. It is now.
Okay. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Heber? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak in this application? Yes, Mr. Schweiker, come on up. Good evening, welcome back. If you could state your name for the record.
My name is Roy Schweiker, and I have, I guess, 2 macro concerns about this project. The first is that the demographics of the state are such that ordinarily there are more people that die in the state than are born. So over time, we would have an ample amount of housing for everyone here, because there'd be more and more vacant housing as people die off and fewer are born. And the reason that we have a housing shortage is people move in from other states. And I don't like the attitude I think I'm hearing from the staff that it's the duty of the residents of Concord to subsidize housing for people moving in from out of state. I think that that's a bad idea. I think that the only group of people who are presently moving out of New Hampshire in greater numbers than are moving in are the senior citizens, because once you quit working, you can't afford to live here anymore. I know my taxes have gone up 20% in 2 years. And so I think we need to try and hold down the projects that are not going to pay for themselves. And so whatever it is, special condition, I think that allowing 3 buildings of apartments and no commercial space to help offset the taxes is a mistake. I think a daycare center in one of those buildings instead of apartments would be very nice. It would reduce the expense of the city and at the same time, provide tax revenue, provide a useful service. So, I mean, you're gonna say, no, too late, we can't do it this time, but I think the staff really needs to crack down on this. We're not gonna be, taking our prime commercial land and turning it into apartment complexes, because that seems to be what people want right now. So I would like to make a definitive statement on that we need to, enforce the fact that this is a, gateway district and it's supposed to be mixed use. It actually becomes mixed use. So that's my first statement. And my second statement is somewhat similar. I think once again, the staff has got a lack of imagination. If this thing was located on a road that was inadequate, you would make the applicant, pay for upgrading the road, not just in front of their property, but back to wherever the, road was adequate. I'm talking about that in terms of the sidewalk. You know, now we're adding, I don't know how many people in a workforce housing unit, 3, 4, 2, I don't know, but now we're having hundreds more people that, you know, aren't owning cars according to them because we're not giving them 2 spaces for each one, that may want to walk. And we're also adding the traffic from all those units. So we're having more traffic on Pembroke Road, more people wanting to get places. And I think that in addition to requiring them to build a sidewalk on their property, you should consider making them do like you would do with the street and connect the sidewalk in one direction or the other or both. And I've heard different numbers. The gentleman here said that it was 1 mile to the nearest sidewalk. That's not the number that I saw in the written description. I think you really need to think about, you know, if we're going to be building housing for people who, you know, may not all have fancy cars, that we need to think about putting the sidewalk in instead of saying, oh, let the city taxpayers pay for it next year. And in line with that, we had an interesting thought that someone made, and that is the right-of-way is wider on the other side of the road. And if you're going to put a crosswalk and a bus stop, maybe you could build the sidewalk on the other side of the road. If that's where the room is and there's no holes in the way. And, you know, once again, they'll say, well, it's not on our property, it's not our problem. But I see this as an access thing. If we can require them to provide motor vehicle access of adequate size to the site, why can't we require them to provide sidewalk access to the site? You know, even if it has to be, you know, on a city right-of-way that they don't own. So anyway, those are my 2 concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Schweiker? Byron.
Mrs. Schweiker, first of all, thanks for coming and testifying tonight. My question is, would you believe I have an adult daughter who lives with her parents and works 2 jobs and lives with her parents because she can't find an affordable apartment in Concord?
I would certainly believe that. I believe there's a lot of people that can't find apartments in Concord, but I don't see why it's the problem of the existing residents to subsidize housing for other people. That if, you know, people want to come and live in Concord, I don't think we should be required to pay for, you know, subsidized housing for people moving in from elsewhere. And the same sort of thing, you know, this is, you know, just an issue that, you know, the developers obviously want to, you know, pay as little as possible because that's where their profit comes from. And I understand why they don't want to build the sidewalk. I understand why they'd rather build apartments instead of putting in a daycare center. But this is the purpose of the planning board. This is not the Wild West. You're supposed to see that, you know, things are good for the whole city and not just for a particular developer.
Follow-up?
Yes.
Mr. Schweiker, would you believe that there are employers in this city who can't find employees or who try to hire employees, but they can't move here to work in our businesses, which rent or pay property taxes on their own because there are not enough apartments? Because the vacancy rate is less than 1%?
Mr. Champlin, I know several people in the city who are homeless that I talk to on a frequent basis. I know there is a lack of apartments, but I don't think that the necessary way to get them is by requiring existing residents of the city to pay increased taxes to provide essentially cheaper housing for other people. And I think that if the wages in this city were more appropriate, and if we had more full-time jobs, that this would not be such an issue. But the city council just approved a project where there's going to be 300 part-time jobs that they want people for. I mean, those should be considered negative, not a positive.
Thank you, Mr. Schweiker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd be interested to hear the math on how the city's subsidizing the project. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay. The way I look at it, traditionally, residential housing has more students in the schools than the taxes they generate will pay for.
Yeah.
And so therefore, if you have a mixed development where some of the projects do not put kids in the school and some does, that tends to even it out. So if you approve a development that is all housing, it's going to cause other people in the city to have to pay increased taxes to do it. And in particular, this is an area that traditionally would not have allowed housing at all. So to go from no housing on this site, commercial to help pay those taxes, to 100% housing on this site, that was what I was objecting to in my original first item, is this is inappropriate. We need to reserve some of our prime commercial land. Pembroke Road is a major road, it could have a commercial site there someday, and now it won't. So I think that's what I'm trying to say, is we need to quit trying to build as much housing we can on our prime commercial sites, our sites that, are on railroad tracks that could, serve as, future industrial land. Why are we putting housing on them? I think we need to look about, and that's what the planning board is supposed to do, is get land used reasonably, and building housing on prime commercial sites is not a reasonable use.
Okay, thank you. Yes,
Hello?
Byron? Yep.
I'm absolutely sensitive to what you're saying about the balance between commercial development and residential development, and trying to find a balance and trying to make sure we maximize our land. Completely on board with you on that, but I'll just note, there are statistics that show that apartment buildings do not generate as many children as single-family homes. And I think a case in point is the Caleb Development Project in Pennacook on the Tannery site, which I think has 34 units, the first phase. And there are only 3 children, I believe, who live in that. So I very much appreciate and am sympathetic to your concern over the property taxes and over broadening the property tax base. I think those are absolutely germane and absolutely important goals for us. But I just point out that statistically, the foundation of your argument, does not hold water.
Well,
that's a mixed metaphor, but I apologize for it.
Okay, and I will say, we will never know for sure, what the balance is gonna be. Even once this place is built, it may change from year to year. But I think to assume that a place that's only gonna have 3 kids for 34 units is well below the normal accepted ratios. I won't say it doesn't happen, because it does.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And the sidewalk issue is well taken, and it's an issue that we wrestle with at every development. And there's from the staff perspective, as far as they want it in there, and recognizing the fact that if we put a sidewalk in, we need to maintain it. If it's a sidewalk that doesn't go anywhere, you don't have a sidewalk plow 1,200 feet away. It doesn't even matter if it's 1,000 feet away, that sidewalk plow then needs to drive down the street to get to that sidewalk to plow it. I understand that it needs to be there, and your point is well taken, that the people in that development are going to want to go out onto Pembroke Road and walk, and if they're walking in the street, it's going to cause a problem. So well taken, and understand that staff recognizes it on these developments that we're doing, and giving the ability for them not to put in the sidewalk, recognizing that a master plan or some type of development is going to need to be done in the future to get us there, and put a sidewalk in the areas that people are going to be walking on it.
Okay, I just want to respond to that. Number one, Mr. Champlin will explain to you that just because there's a sidewalk there doesn't prove the city maintains it. In fact, as I recall, the Pennacook Crossing or whatever it is, the developer is required to maintain the sidewalk on the roundabout or whatever. So, and the second thing is, as far as the sidewalk to nowhere, that's why I've expressed my opinion that if you can require an applicant to build a satisfactory road connection to somewhere, why can't you require them to build a satisfactory sidewalk connection to somewhere? It's a different form of travel.
Yep. Well taken. Point's well taken. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Schwenker? No? Thank you very much for your testimony. Anybody else like to come up and speak to this application? Come on up. Good evening. If you could state your name for the record and sign in there, it'd be great.
Sure thing. My name's Matt Tarrant. I live at 95 Pembroke Road. So I will be a neighbor. I do definitely have concerns about sidewalks. Where are these kids going to get on the bus? The plows, there's no place to walk in the winter. The sidewalks don't stop at 70. They go to Goy Street. There should be a connection. You guys should make them do that. Furthermore, I think.
Sorry, let me just, so Gay Street, Goy Street, the sidewalk goes all the way down on the.
It does. It doesn't stop at 70.
On the same side of the street that we're doing the development.
Yep. That's right.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, you got dogs, they're gonna wanna walk them somewhere. You can't walk, you got a commercial driving school on that street. You can't walk in the street on Pembroke Road. Furthermore, is there any reason why the access couldn't be to the backside near Target? Do we have to add more traffic on Pembroke Road?
We can ask that question to the applicant. I mean, they gotta own the land to get to the access on
Yeah,
the
I
other
wasn't
side.
sure if it goes all the way
I
back
don't
or
know that
not.
they can go back through that
They don't,
backside.
okay.
No.
So that's my main concern, just consider the sidewalks. I don't want to see people walking in the streets. You're already adding a bunch of housing at BD Electric
Yep.
in the coming years.
Sprague Electric.
Sprague.
Or Sprague,
Electric,
rather.
yeah.
The sidewalks are already atrocious on our street.
Yeah.
They're terrible. It takes days to get them plowed sometimes. So those are just things that you guys should consider.
Okay.
You know, the people living there, right?
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Tran? No? Thank you very much for your testimony. Anybody else like to speak on this application? Last chance? No? Okay, so we'll have the applicant come back up next. Okay, so you heard some comments, some questions, some concerns. If you want to take a shot at them, that'd be
Well, we
great.
can do our best. Relative to the components that were raised by, I think, actually two of the individuals, that had to do with the bus, which I think the board has already been able to reasonably address as to how that would move forward. Some of the other components we heard are really in regards to the sidewalk. The whole discussion of fragmented sidewalk, when do you build it, when do you don't, when do you require it? I think boards have always struggled with that. And that, Mr. Chairman, that was one of the things you mentioned as well. What we tried to do was work with staff to provide a creative solution, a solution in which a sidewalk could be built at an appropriate time, consistent with the city's vision for the master plan, because it is our understanding, Heather conveyed this to us early in the project, that this area is part of the future vision to have sidewalks and have interconnection. The concern becomes, all right, well, wherever we put it now is where it goes. And is that going to be the best layout for whatever future considerations there are along Pembroke Road or Sheep Davis Road? The fact that we were able to sit here and discuss, well, could it go here, could it go there? In my mind tells me it's a little premature to install it, but it's not premature to plan for it, which is what we were trying to accomplish with the easement. So by the token that the easement would be there, it gives the city the flexibility to construct it when is appropriate. I think that's the best answer that I can give relative to the sidewalk element.
It is an ongoing issue, and it's an issue that we struggle with almost on every single development. And I'm sensitive to the fact that if it comes to Gay Street there, I used to walk it when I was a kid. I mean, I walked from that street all the way up to Dame School every single day, barefoot, two ways.
Two
back and
ways.
forth.
Uphill both ways.
Even though there's no hill there now, uphill. But and it's probably the same sidewalk that was there when I was a kid, but that's a long ways from that turning Gay Street. You're going around by the Hatch's place, you're coming around that corner and then down. And it is it's private property. We can't tell you to build the sidewalk on that private property up to Gay Street. It's just not gonna, that won't work that way. But I'm sensitive to the fact that it needs to be done and we need to figure out a way to get it done. And it, in theory, would be better on the other side of the street. But all the residents are on this side of the street.
Yeah, as you work,
almost all of the
that
residents,
southerly
all the
end
way
is
up
almost all
to
industrial.
Sprague is on this side of the street. Yeah, I do want to ask about the gentleman from the Shriners, from the Bekdash, that mentioned the fence, mentioned the parking lot, mentioned the overflow. So obviously one of the variances is the parking. Give us a little bit of reasoning for the parking variance as far as the number of units, the number of parking. And again, we see and know that you build an apartment building and there's 100 units in it, everybody's not going to have two cars. We know that. Even though you think everybody's got two cars, we know that everybody doesn't have two cars, and we've seen it time and time again.
So if you'd like, I can actually read through the project narrative.
No, that's fine.
All right. So what we do is we look at the institutional standards that are appropriate. We look at IT for a mid-range building of this size. Are we consistent with it? I believe their requirement is 1.3 parking spaces per unit. We're at 1.65. If you round up, it's 1.7. We're like 1.6589, whatever we want to call it. So we are on the high end when we look at what the appropriate periodicals that you would read, the references in relationship to this project. I think the ownership team has done a good job in evaluating what their needs were for parking. We didn't try and go with something that is at 1.3, 1.4, 1.5. It is, again, on that higher end. And one of the points that I think I made during the presentation was the ability to readily build this parking should it be required. It's directly along the drive access aisles. There's no regrading that would be required relative to the future considerations plan that we've provided. It is simply as easy as peeling off the loam, compacting it, and then building those paved areas. So if for some reason this was a concern, it's something that could be readily identifiable and those paved spaces could be built. The reality is, much like the city, the applicant has no interest in being underserved in parking. They need that to have the appropriate amount of parking to make sure their facility works as intended. It also allows us, though, to minimize our footprint, which is of importance when we're dealing with issues with rare and endangered species, vegetation or otherwise, within that proximity. And also when you have a residential use in close proximity to non-residential uses, whether it's industrial, commercial, or otherwise, trying to maintain as much of an existing buffer in our minds really trumps that need. And the fact that we have that fail-safe and that additional parking could be built at your request, I think it serves the project and the city well.
So at our request or at the residents' request? I mean, if the residents are complaining they don't have enough parking, the owner's going to be responsible for fulfilling it.
And the reality is, if he has that parking issue, that's a problem from him.
Yeah.
And
Gonna have a
that's
hard
not of
time renting
interest.
spots, I get it. So talk a little bit about the overflow aspect going through the woods and a fence.
Sure.
I mean,
So-
I hate to put fences in if we don't have to, especially in a wooded area. I just don't want to do that if we
I
don't
think
have to.
logistically speaking, it would be very difficult to install fence through there, but one of the things we do have working in our favor is really the topography and how we've designed the site. I know our computer is not necessarily up and running at the moment as far as
Well, we got the
password.
plans in front of us.
Okay, so when we look along specifically that westerly edge, one of the things you'll notice, one of the predominant features is the stormwater management system. Essentially, someone would have to walk through a stormwater management area, which is down approximately 4.5 feet from the paved road, down through that, back up it in order to cross the property. Now, as you work your way southwest to the lowest corner of the property, there is that cleared easement area. So I'm thinking, if anything, somebody might be traversing through that area. But given that we're going to have adequate parking, I'm trying to understand the reasoning why residents at this property would feel obligated or the desire to walk next door to the Shriners property.
Well, if we make you fill in that middle courtyard and don't have a place to throw a football, they're going to go over the Shriners, right?
I wasn't going to make that argument. I didn't think that would hold water, but it was in the back of my head. But you can see how I think this really lends itself to the diligence in how this property was laid out. Why have we provided that central courtyard area for that play space? Because we don't have it elsewhere. The questions as to, well, where are we going to walk the dogs? Well, that's why we've provided a dog park. We have tried to incorporate those elements within this project so that we don't create those issues for our neighbors.
We keep people on the property. So it doesn't look like there's, I mean, on the picture, it doesn't look like there's a lot of space between the paved Bektash area and then your lot. It looks maybe one or two tree lines through, but you said there's going to be a swale there, or?
Yeah, so there's stormwater management features along both sides there. There is one portion that is fairly flat. There's probably about 2.5, 3 feet of grade change. But the reality is we've had to fill this site in order to make it viable due to those depths to groundwater we discussed earlier.
Okay, did I miss? Yes, Matt?
So if you could help me understand how the whole complex is managed on a day-to-day basis. So if somebody from the Shriners does have a trespassing issue, who do they call? How do they deal with that?
Sure, so there will be a professional property management company that manages the complex. They have 24/7 contact information available. There will be, at least during lease-up, there will be a full-time person on site, and throughout the, once the project's fully leased, there will also be a contact person. I'm not sure what, we'll have to determine as we go whether that person will be full-time or not, but there will always be a contact person with Hodges Management, which is the management company they own. They own and manage several hundred units in the area.
As a follow-up, pardon me if I'm skeptical of their ability to get somebody. who is going to understand that complex and actually manage it. But I am sympathetic to the neighbors. I do think that it is going to be a problem. Even that many people on a crowded site, I do think there's going to be overflow. You also have you have Bake in that parking lot right next door. You have other businesses, within walking distance. So I'm not saying to fence in the whole property. I'm just saying that I do think, realistically, I do think it is going to be a problem, especially for the Shriners.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to give Nick and Mr. Tamposi a heart attack here, so don't worry. But I wonder, asking staff, are there any precedences for communities in a project like this when we have an issue around, future development of a sidewalk to escrow funds from the developer for that purpose?
We've actually suggested that before. I think there was a project recently just down the road where we recommended the escrow. It is an option in the ordinance. The regulations allow for that. We've never used it before, so we don't necessarily have anything in place to manage direct the funds or manage them that way. But that is an option literally in the regulations right now, that you can ask for an escrow. The challenge is, if it's not built for 20 years, are we just going to hold that escrow for 20 years, and then what's the cost going to be in 20 years? Is it going to be 3 times, 4 times?
Right.
It certainly won't be the same.
No, certainly not.
But we do, and that was a suggestion that we had to write into our code, perhaps, was to allow funds to be put directly. There's no route, there's no procedural route, but to allow funds to be put to be allocated towards a CIP, create a CIP for that, and then allow those funds to go directly towards that CIP. So it's similar to what we did with the street trees, or with the landscape trees. We got the CUP. In that case, we had the street tree fund already set up. So we were able to say, okay, well, how about we put the funds into the street tree fund, and then they can go to other locations for trees in the city. We don't have a fund or a particular thing set up for escrow for sidewalks, but I think it's a great idea. I think it would solve the problem, and it is authorized currently in the code. It's not something we've used or have set up.
Well, the City Council has priority setting session coming up in January, and
put that on your list.
I think I'm going to put that on my list.
Did you have a question, Carol?
No, I had
Okay, you had
written
the same
down
thing,
escrow
escrow.
before this discussion came up, so.
Any member of the board have any other follow-up questions? Yes.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to follow up on the CUP for the parking. So in the proposed code, the proposal in the code that we're working on is for multifamily houses to be 1.25 cars per unit. Instead of 2 per unit, 1.25. Because as Nick said, that's kind of more of the industry standard for what multifamily needs. We've also had other developers come to us to say that was consistent with what their needs were. And so we felt comfortable with that 1.25 number. In fact, he's telling me it's 1.6. That's more than others have told us that they would need for market rate housing. So I think that we're comfortable with that, and it's consistent with best planning practices. The CUP, when Nick said, you can tell us to build it if you want, because the zoning ordinance authorizes the code administrator to demand that they construct the parking if there's any concerns. So I would encourage neighbors, if you do have trespassing issues, to reach out to the zoning administrator to say, hey, this is occurring, you should make them build that extra parking. And I think that Nick would probably feel comfortable with that, feeling confident that they have enough parking. Correct. So the city can require them to construct the 2 spaces per unit that the zoning currently requires. And we always encourage the CUP, because if an applicant doesn't feel that if a property owner a developer doesn't feel that they need the parking, having a facility that's overparked is one of the worst problems you don't want to have. And we're familiar with that in a lot of these locations, that there's a lot of parking that's not needed.
And staff's comfortable with the fact that there's parking there that needed to be added, right?
Well, the staff's comfortable that they have designed and engineered appropriately the amount of parking that is required by the code, and they can build it if we need them to.
So I read an interesting article that said that traditional single-family, you know, two working adults are oftentimes now looking for two-bedroom apartments, one for a home office and one for a bedroom. And so two bedrooms are becoming the norm, if you will. You don't have to answer this, Mr. Tamposi, but I'm interested to hear if you've made any decisions on the structure and the layout on the insides as far as 1, 2, and 3 bedroom, or are there any 3 bedroom, or is it primarily going to be 1 and 2s? And again, you don't have to answer. You just say no, we haven't decided, and I'm fine with that. But I'm interested. Just inquiring minds.
Sure. Our intent is to have most or all 2-bedroom units. We find that that's where the lowest vacancy rates are, that's where the highest demand is. And as you said, it creates that opportunity for homework situation as well.
Yeah, okay. Great, you guys are excused. I saw a hand go back up, so we'll keep the public hearing open just for a sec, but you guys are good to go. Thank you very much for your testimony. Mr. Herbert, did you have a question?
Just a quick, clarification, the parking is part of it, but the other part of it is ease of access for recreational use onto our property.
Yeah.
And it's already a problem. We have people parking there a lot. It's our building. It's not manned every day. We don't use it every day. But yet we pay full city taxes, and I just see it becoming a problem with a large paved parking lot. If this place does have a lot of children, it being a problem.
Okay. Where people are parking there now? Where are they going? Where are they?
They just park there.
And
it happens all over the city. It happens everywhere.
Where they go? Yeah, people that eat lunch there every day. We have tractor trailers I have to kick out when I'm there.
Okay.
I deal with it all the time.
You do it all the time.
There's a lack of respect for people that
Private property.
have property.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Schweiker.
I'm just very concerned about whether our city planner is getting data from places that resemble Concord in terms of this 1.25, cars per unit. I mean, I've got a place across the street from me, and they often have 3 cars per unit because the guy has a car, his girlfriend has a car, and he's got a truck from his work that he also has to park someplace. So, 1.25, I mean, maybe that's in an urban area where people take the bus to work or something like that, but I think that before you start, pulling national statistics on 1.25, we need to look about, what's actually happening in Concord. I know another place that, they've got, each of the adults has a car, but they've got 2 teenage kids. And at what point in time is one of those teenage kids going to get a car and have 3?
Yep.
So, we need to not look at national numbers. We need to look about what we actually have here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Any other questions? Going to close the public hearing. Good with questions, so we'll close the public hearing. And holy cow. I was looking at them all in totality here. Okay, so can we do all the conditional use permits in once, or you want to do them individually?
We should do it individually.
Do this individually?
Yes.
Okay, so 2.1 is the applicant's request.
6 point.
Oh, sorry, that's why it's so spread out. All right, that's where I was before. Thank you, Sam. Okay, so in your packet here, under recommendations under 6.1 is to grant the following conditional use permits. Article on A, I'm going to do A, B, and C on 6.1, which is 28.711F, driveway separation alternatives to provide a driveway separation of 160 feet from the driveway at 189 Pembroke Road, 162 feet the Pembroke Road Drive of 2 Industrial Park Drive, 101 feet from the drive at 212 Pembroke Road, and 150 feet from the Pembroke Road driveway at 249 Sheep Davis Road, where 200 feet of separation is required. Article 28.711B, construction of fewer parking spaces to provide 204 parking spaces where 246 would be required, and Article 28C, which is Article 2845E1, mixed-use component requirement to not provide a commercial component in this development. Would someone like to make a motion to grant those following conditional use permits as outlined? I'll make the motion.
Second.
Would anybody second it? Any discussion? Comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. 6.2 is to grant the following waivers utilizing the criteria from RSA 674-36-2N2, specific circumstances relative to the subdivision or conditions of the land in such subdivisions indicate that the waiver will properly carry out the spirit and intent of the regulations, section 16.0311 and section 22.072. Would someone like to make a motion to grant the following waivers as outlined? I'll make that motion. Someone like to second it?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 6.3 is to determine whether to grant the waiver to section 2102, sidewalks required, of the site plan regulations utilizing the criteria from RSA 674-36-2N2, specific circumstances relative to the subdivision or conditions of the land in such subdivision indicate that the waiver will properly carry out the spirit and intent of the regulation. I will make a motion to determine, in 6.3, to determine or to grant that waiver as outlined.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Again, recognizing that sidewalks are an issue, and I think staff has got that message as well.
Well, would this be the place where we would ask for an escrow?
I don't know that we have enough information. We can, certainly can ask for it. I just don't know that we have enough information on the process. I think Byron wants to weigh in.
Madam Vice Chair, my understanding from what staff said is that we don't really have a system set up in the city to administer them right now. So I think that more work does have to be done.
Okay.
So perhaps not for this case, but for future cases. Is that fair to say?
I'm inclined to vote against this waiver just to make a point, so it's not unanimous, so that we actually pay some attention to this.
Absolutely. Duly noted.
I will join you, Matt.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the table. I think we have a second. Did we have a second
Yes.
with David?
You did.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, just by hands. Aye. Okay, opposed?
No.
Two opposed. So that motion carries. 4 point, sorry, keep going back, sorry about that. 6.4 is to grant ADR approval for the building design, landscape, and layout with the following conditions outlined in A, B, C, D, and E. Were there any additional ADR type approvals regarding this as far as the conversations regarding the doors, regarding the back portion? Again, I think we talked about it, and I don't know if that there's a good solution, but do we have anything else, Sam?
So this past ADR meeting, it was the second ADR meeting they came to. They did a kind of a preliminary discussion where a lot of what you just said was fleshed out, and the doors had come up. ADR understands that they are meeting egress requirements and also, the impact of additional doors on unit counts. So they did not push on this last ADR
So,
meeting.
I know the applicant's got some notes regarding landscape plantings, and I think that's a great idea to break that up and to break up that design. So, with that in mind, would someone like to make a motion to grant, oops, sorry, go ahead, Steph.
So what does continue the sidewalk serving the northern entrance into the courtyard mean?
So they wanted to see the sidewalk from the sidewalk along the parking that goes down to the entrance on the northern end of the two northern buildings, curve in along the side of the buildings into, just as a way to show a path into the courtyard. It was
So are you saying like if you've got the sidewalk from parking to this building, the sidewalk from the parking to this building, they connect along the parking, but you're saying another entrance,
no,
another?
not connects. Just basically, if this is the sidewalk along the parking, entrance, curve in, and just end.
So not connect between the two to provide that piece, but just literally just curve around the
Just
corner
to
and
guide
end?
people into the courtyard.
But they're saying to continue the sidewalk serving the northern entrances into the courtyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it would basically be a continuation off of the entrance sidewalk, and it would just.
So is it what we saw on the plans that
No.
we saw?
No.
I think that one's odd.
It is odd, and it's worded odd. Yeah. Sam.
Came right from the minutes, and that was from our recording, so.
Yeah.
I could see if you said connect closer to the buildings between the two to kind of, so you could walk from this building to this without having to go out to the park and back. And that also kind of provided you that northern connection into the, I could see that, and I mean, I could go along with that as an acceptable.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that.
No problem.
How do we
Why
feel
didn't we see
about,
that before? So,
how do we feel about the idea that we want them to do additional entrances into the courtyard, like those two northern points to provide a connection between those two buildings, which Carol brought up?
I don't think, I mean, I speak for myself and everybody can chime in, but I don't think that's,
You're not in favor of
I'm
that?
not in favor of that.
Well, I think it reduces the number of units, if I understand it
Right.
correctly.
Absolutely
By two.
does.
Yep.
Right.
So maybe you would like to just simply strike B?
Yeah, I'd like to, if we're gonna approve it, I wanna approve what we were looking at on the screen, and I don't wanna change the way that sidewalk looked.
Then I would just say strike
So
that
striking B.
condition.
Carol?
I don't know, just given the length of the building issue that Heather brought up, makes me even more feel like we really need a connection between another connection between the two buildings. But,
It's a sacrifice of the units, for sure, like you said.
right.
So it depends how everyone feels about that.
Yeah, I mean, chime in if you have a comment or question or concern regarding that. If not, I'm gonna recommend that we strike B out of 6.4. Yes, Heather?
Sorry, did we decide they were providing lighting for the dog park?
We got there yet.
The ADR comment on that was that there is an overhead light right in front of the dog park, but the light is on the parking lot side. So at that meeting, the applicant said they could make that a double-headed, so that there is one on the dog park side as
And the
well.
applicant was amenable to that, okay. And I would just suggest striking A as well, because it says specifically provide landscaping for shading, and I think I'm hearing the board say that we don't want to force them to do that, while C says resubmit a plan showing foundation plantings, which I think they were amenable to as well. So I would strike A and B and then go.
What exactly does E mean? Engineering staff should review courtyard drainage with consideration paid to the human element.
What does that mean?
What the hell's a human element?
Your guess is as good as mine.
I'm gonna strike that as well then. So, what do we got left? C?
C and D.
C and D.
Okay.
So grant ADR approval for the building design, landscape, and layout with the following conditions, which will be C and D. We'll rename them, or C and leave them as C and D, which is basically to submit a clear landscape path and to provide lighting for the dog park.
I'll move approval.
Move approval. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion regarding that? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carol. 6.4.
Carol, you're opposed?
Carol's opposed, yes. 6.4, so we'll move to 6.5, which is to grant major site plan approval for the proposed 3-building, 123-unit development and associated site improvements at 195 Pembroke Road in the Gateway Performance District, subject to the following precedent and subsequent conditions noted below, and that's precedent conditions 1 through 5, and subsequent conditions 1, 2, and 3. Would someone like to make a motion to grant major site plan approval as outlined?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just because I'm not sure how it's gonna be captured, can we make sure there's a comment in here about them working with staff to look at the bus?
Thank you very much, Jeff, appreciate
If
that.
that doesn't get in here, it gets lost, it's only in the
So
minutes.
subsequent, would that be a subsequent condition? Or precedent? Precedent condition, that the applicant will work with the staff regarding bus, both school buses and public transportation buses. Okay, so I'm not gonna read that again. We've got the major site plan, precedent conditions 1 through 6 now with the bus note, and subsequent conditions 1, 2, and 3. Would someone like to make a motion to grant major site plan approval as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Discussion? Opposed? That motion carries. Sorry, did that out of order. That motion carries. And that is it. Thank you very much. You guys, I wish you good luck on the project, and
Did you get your question?
hopefully we don't see you back for an amended. Okay, moves us on to item 7 in our agenda tonight for amendments. Item 7A, if we could read that into the record.
Proposed ordinance amending the Code of Ordinances, Title 4, Zoning Code, Chapter 28, Article 28-2, Zoning Districts and Allowable Uses, to remove clinics and outpatient healthcare services as permitted uses in the Central Business Performance District and Neighborhood Commercial Neighborhood Commercial District.
All right, we want to do a staff update, or we want to invite Mr. Baye up to the stand here and have him give us an update?
Let's
let Carlos.
He's waited a long time.
He has waited a long time. Thank you very much for waiting. If you could state your name for the record.
Sure. Good evening, members of the board. I'm Carlos Baye with the City of Concord. Thank you for having me tonight. Just wanted to basically provide a quick update or a brief summary just on the report that was submitted regarding this item. So the city's zoning ordinance, as you probably know, currently includes category E3, which allows for offices of healthcare practitioners, including clinics and outpatient healthcare, and allows this by right in 9 zoning districts and by CUP in a 10th. City administration is recommending the following amendments to this particular section. First, we are suggesting that we change use category E3 to simply read offices of healthcare practitioners, and the zoning districts in which this use would be allowed would not be changed. They would stay the same. Second, we recommend establishing a new use category E6 for clinics providing outpatient procedures, walk-in services, urgent care, and substance abuse treatment. This new use category would be permitted in the same districts as use category E3, with the exception of the Central Business Performance, or CBP district, which is basically the main street of downtown Concord as well as the village street of downtown Pennacook. And also in the Neighborhood Commercial Zoning District, or CN district, we would ask that it would not be permitted there. Today, the CUP is for the Neighborhood Commercial District in the existing ordinance. I just want to make sure to be clear for the record that even with this change, clinics would still be permitted in 8 zoning districts, which in fact would be 80% of our total commercial and performance districts. And if you look at the use tables, that would still be probably one of the uses with the most allowable areas to locate in the city. So it has a significant advantage over other commercial uses. And we believe that the proposed zoning amendments would clarify the city's use table and also create consistency with the purpose and character of the CBP and CN districts. If you do take a read of the purpose section of the ordinance, the CBP district is intended to incorporate uses such as, and I'm quoting here, retail, restaurant, service, entertainment, cultural, lodging, office, governmental, and high-density residential, typically in a pedestrian area with little or no on-site parking, end of quote. And in fact, as you know, parking is not required in the CBP. So as you can tell from that description in the purpose section, there is no mention of clinics. Part of the reason to explain this omission is these facilities are not typically associated with pedestrian-oriented areas. I mean, in large cities, they might be, like a Boston or New York, but in this area, not the case. And from a practical perspective, clinics many times require convenient on-site parking. People are coming in for injuries, emergent illnesses, things of that nature. There's waiting rooms associated with this, so it's typically an area they want dedicated on-site parking. The master plan recognizes this and actually discourages these types of uses from the downtown, and actually says they should be outside the downtown core. And in practice, that's what you see today. I mean, if you look at where we have our clinics, like Convenient MD, it's located on Loudon Road, has dedicated parking. Horseshoe Pond Urgent Care has dedicated parking. Metro Treatment Center on Hall Street also has dedicated parking. So that would be the reasoning there. As for the CN district, so the neighborhood commercial districts, there are very few neighborhood commercial districts in the city. They're very small and just only a handful. And they typically tend to be areas where there's basically a little village, if you will. If you recall the 2020 plan from Concord 20 years ago, talking about the villages, well, they tend to be centered around these little nodes. And when you have retail there, the description in the purpose section for the zoning ordinance for CN talks about, residential uses, and then you might have basically convenience retail and services that are really meant to service the little neighborhood. It's not really meant to be businesses that attract people from community-wide outside the neighborhood. So again, we're trying to create some consistency there with this change this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions.
And just to clarify that point, I'm a visual person, so the CN district for me, the closest one that I can think of is McKee Square with CVS and a little bank, and now it used to be another pharmacy, but it's some type of
Physical therapy, I think?
a therapy building. It's a teeny little district. There's 3 buildings in it, and it's a little spot district in the middle, and it serves that whole south end area because everybody else around it is obviously is residential.
Right, and then so just for
and
reference,
there's a bunch of
right,
little teeny little spots.
So I can think of the ones off the top of my mind here, off the top of my head is at the high school in Warren Street, where Warren Street intersects with Pleasant. That's basically a little CN district as well. There's a store there at the corner. At North State Street and where Knight Street comes in, there's a little small commercial area right there that's also a CN district.
Yeah.
I might be missing one, but I've captured most of them.
Yeah. Okay. Questions, comments? It's always tough reading ordinances. I go through, reading through the ordinance, and it's like a different language in some of them.
That's why I appreciate the city attorney.
Absolutely. So, questions of Mr. Baia? No? Members of the audience have any questions, concerns? Yes, come on up. Thank you, Mr. Baia. Thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the board. My name is Annika Stanley Smith. I'm the Director of Substance Misuse Prevention for the Capital Area Public Health Network. We serve Concord and 23 surrounding towns. And some of the services that we provide include vaccinations. You might have heard of our 1,000-member clinic that we just had this weekend. We were able to vaccinate over 1,000 citizens at that clinic.
Well done.
Thank you. It was with the help of lots of volunteers and folks from all over the state, but that just gives you an idea of some of the work that we do and the category of the work that we do. We also do a lot of smaller clinics. We don't just do vaccine clinics. We do prevention for substance misuse disorders. We help with suicide prevention, and we work with a lot of the partners that are downtown. So looking at the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness, looking at the Doorways, Riverbend, et cetera. So our concern with this ordinance is that we would be limiting the ability to serve people in Concord if this were to change. We don't have a permanent location downtown, so that wouldn't affect us, but a lot of the clinics that we do are at these areas. So we're worried that this would limit our ability to serve those people. So, and a group of people that are often hard to reach, and so we want to make sure that we keep that availability because it is a public health issue. So often when we look at diseases, they don't just stay in one population, they spread to the whole population. If you look at COVID, if you look at substance use disorders, many diseases, they're public health issues. So we want to make sure that we have, as a public health network, ensure that barriers to substance use disorder treatment, prevention, recovery, suicide prevention, and mental health treatment, all of those barriers remain low so we can get people into services as soon as possible and get them as much services as possible. So we're concerned that this will limit that. So that is all we have to say today.
How so? I'm just interested in how it limits it. Again, is looking at it from the existing places that we've got in the city that are by right, you can put it in there. There seems to be a lot of space available that you could put things in that geographically hit all of the areas within the city. I'm intrigued as to how you see it as limiting, other than having it available anywhere you want it, which
Absolutely.
we can do, but.
So our understanding of the ordinance, the way it is written, is that it would limit our ability, and we are not lawyers, we're working on our lawyers to look at it, but our understanding is that, so Concord Coalition to End Homelessness is on Main Street. the
Yep,
extension of
yep.
Main Street. So that's one of the places that we've offered vaccines in the past. Flu vaccines included, so not just COVID vaccines, Narcan clinics, all those kind of things. So our concern is that it would limit our ability to do that.
At that location.
At that location, and then we also are concerned that this would limit Riverbend's doorway. One of the neighborhoods looks like it's in that area specifically.
We'll get some clarification on that.
Sure, that would be excellent.
Yeah.
And then I know I'm not the only person here to speak, and I want to respect your time, but those are just concerns that we have, and we want to do whatever we can to continue to work with the city.
Just hang on. Yep, Byron?
Thanks. Hi, it's great to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Yeah, good. Now, are these primarily pop-up clinics that you're talking about?
Yes, so they're not permanent clinics, but they are like walk-in clinics in our definition. They would be
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
walk-in clinic. Where we necessarily wouldn't have to have someone make an appointment beforehand. We would just accept someone as they come in. So the clinic that we did this weekend for COVID, which was not on Main Street, we allowed walk-ins for that. So it kind of gives you an idea of, it is something that we practice regularly to allow people to meet us where they're at.
All right, thanks.
I'm intrigued by the pop-up clinic, so that intrigues me as an alternative. So if you were, again, ordinance change going forward, you can't do permanently, you can't open up a facility on Main Street, but you could have a pop-up clinic. I don't know that we've even thought of that, so we'll address that with Mr. Baea.
Excellent.
And I'm intrigued to kind of look into that and see if there's opportunities there to flesh it out.
Thank you. That would be fabulous. We
And
appreciate
there's
it.
hundreds of other people waiting to talk, so. Can we have you sign in, please?
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
How many pop-up clinics create?
It's because I moved this.
Come on up.
That's why I asked the question.
Don't go to the Bektash Temple. They don't want you parking at the Bektash Temple.
No.
Only kidding.
And we
Bektash
only
Temple.
go to places
Only
that
kidding.
we're given permission to
Only
go.
kidding.
We don't just
That
pop
was
in
a-
wherever.
That was a
but-
poor attempt at a joke at 9:35.
Don't go to the Festival of Trees in the future.
Welcome to the table. If you could state your name for the record?
Thank you. My name is Lauren McGinley. I'm the Executive Director for the New Hampshire Harm Reduction Coalition. We are a statewide coalition. We have services that operate in Concord, Manchester, most of Stratford County, and hopefully soon to be Laconia Tilton. So it is my concern, almost identical to Ani's, about some of the imprecise wording within this change. The phrase clinics, medical treatment, walk-in care, walk-in services. I think very specific definitions would need to come forward of what those would entail. Substance use treatment would potentially need to be identified. I thought I was being too precise as I was reading this, but after sitting through 2 hours of this, I realized I was not being too precise. You all have magical brains. Precision seems to be key here, so.
And depending on what side of the ledger you're on, precision is important. Ordinance is sometimes ambiguity,
yes.
is a benefit.
Yes, so that is my concern, actually, is that some of the areas are gray.
Yep.
Additionally, my concern is the very specific call-out of substance use treatment services. The first three categories of services that would be barred from these two districts are rather broad. The fourth being substance use treatment services, which is a very specific call-out. I'm concerned about that being stigmatizing and potentially limiting where those services could be had in the city. While over 80% of the city would be able to host substance use treatment services, that is not the case. Almost 100% of those services are being in some way generated by the Concord Doorway, which the address does exist within one of these districts. If anybody needs a quick summary of what the Doorway is,
Please,
I'm
yeah.
happy to give. Okay, sure.
Right ahead.
So the Doorway program opened about 2.5 years ago. It's a statewide access to substance use disorder treatment plan that came through the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services. There are 8 doorways, 9 if you count overnight coverage by Dartmouth Hitchcock. One of those doorways is the doorway at Concord, and that exists at 40 Pleasant Street, which does fall into the CBP district. So there's not the ability to move them. I did see that any service would be able, or any building that is in violation of these codes would be able to apply for non-conforming use. That was fun to read through, so.
It's a treat, isn't it?
It's fun. It seems to be complicated also on the onus of the business or the organization to apply for that themselves.
Something you have to apply for.
And it seems to also push that business or that building into a sort of a box, so that expansion might be more difficult to navigate, or changes to the building might be more difficult to navigate in the future.
And we hope that that's not by design. I mean, it's just unfortunately part of the bureaucracy of getting through from point A to point B sometimes is very challenging. Did you have,
I just wanted to clarify, you don't have to apply for non-conforming status. You are automatically non-conforming because
Day
you're,
one.
yeah,
You're already there.
you're already there, the change was made, you're automatically considered non-conforming. But you're correct that some other changes might be challenging, like expansions or things like
Sure.
that.
So it
if
would
you're
limit, it
considered-
would, okay. Thank you for clarifying. The ordinance stated that the application for non-conforming use was on the responsibility of the building owner. So I was concerned that it would place these rather small nonprofits with very, threadbare staff.
a little onerous.
Yes.
Now aren't you glad you came, so you learned that?
I did learn that.
Takes a
That's
weight off,
excellent. Additionally, I have to, speak out that it concerns me as well that the Equality Health Center would be included within this district, and rezoning would be something that they would have to navigate and look through.
Let's see, where's the Equality Health Center?
Corner of Thompson Street.
Thompson
and-
Street. Now, that was addressed in our
Yes.
packet.
It was,
Yes.
yes.
But they don't have,
I believe they qualify as medical offices.
yeah, no, hang on, I just want to, so staff is aware of one clinic currently located in the CBP on South Main Street at Thompson Street. This facility was originally in the CU, Urban Commercial District, and has its own parking lot. The property was only recently incorporated into CBP with the rezoning of the remainder of the block for the redevelopment of the former New Hampshire Employment Security Building. This property could still be continued in accordance with the city zoning ordinance, Article 28.4, non-conforming land use, non-conforming uses of land. So,
I think Byron was
Yeah, I
going to
believe Mr.
clarify.
Baillet will speak to this
okay,
when he
so
comes up.
we'll address that point.
I forgot one last
Okay.
issue. Additionally, the City of Concord and Riverbend just, I say just, but it's probably been about 6 months, opened the Crisis Treatment Center, which is self-identified as a walk-in mental health crisis treatment center. They would deal with all issues related to behavioral health. Behavioral health is a combination of issues related to mental health and substance use disorder. And that also exists within this district, so slight concerns over some of the really critical services that this would impact.
Okay, great.
Great.
Any questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
I'll sign in real fast.
You do good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I bring up one more concern?
Certainly. We won't make you state your name for the record again, but
Sorry
you're welcome
sorry
to
to
bring
hop in
one.
and out. Many of you may know already, but the City of Concord is a recovery-friendly workplace. And so what that means is they try to treat people with substance use disorders the same as they would treat anyone else. So my concern is with the language of this ordinance. It uses substance abuse. That's not language that we clinically use anymore. So updating the language to, while we don't want to discriminate against substance use disorder treatment, making sure that any language that's reflected in these ordinances or reports uses anti-discriminatory and anti-stigmatizing language, so to include substance use disorder instead of substance abuse. That's my...
Is there substance abuse disorder as opposed
Substance
to?
use.
Substance, yeah. So abuse is what happens to...
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Abuse is
I got it.
not the language that we
So
use.
use substance use?
Substance use, yeah. That's the clinical use.
Disorder.
That's what you'll hear doctors use. That
Use
kind of thing.
disorder. Substance use disorder.
Yes, sir.
Is it disorder or misuse?
So you can misuse things and not have a disorder.
Right.
And then the diagnosable disease would be a disorder, which can be mild, moderate, severe. We can really go down that tangent for a long time, but
I just
yeah,
heard both terms, so I was
so
curious.
like alcohol is a legal substance, but you can misuse it by drinking 5 or more drinks in 2 hours. That would be like a diagnosable binge drinking episode. So,
Thanks.
Great, thank you.
my pleasure. Thank you so much. very
Thanks.
much.
All right, Mr. Baye, you're back up.
All right, thank you. And thank you to the people that spoke. Actually, that was
Absolutely. That was very helpful.
Informative, just to know at least all the efforts that are going on
Yep.
right now in the community. So I'm going to try and answer all the questions that came up. A couple of locations were mentioned. So the Concord Coalition to End Homelessness, their center, I believe it's actually in CU and not in CBP, but the Riverbend doorway, the two buildings at Riverbend at the end of North State Street and the corner of Pleasant Street, those are the ones you're talking about, right?
40, yep.
Yep. So those are in fact in CBP, and as the city planner mentioned, they would be grandfathered, if you will, as part of this, if this was adopted by the city council. So they would become a non-conforming use, and everything that she mentioned is absolutely spot on in terms of what it would mean, but there'd be no actual application that the owner of the property would have to do, or the business owner. As far as the pop-up clinics, that's not a principal use the way it was described, so it really wouldn't be affected by the zoning ordinance. If anything, I think it might be a special event permit, for example, for if an establishment wants to do something like that, that might impact, traffic coming into the site and things like that, which we would work with, just like we work with any organization that wants to do something special, whether it's a March for Life or a breast cancer walk or whatever it might be, things like that. The Quality Health Center, just for clarification, so coincidentally, the executive director of the Quality Health Center is my next door neighbor, and she called me this afternoon to clarify, because she read through this, and she says, Carlos, you haven't talked to me. I live literally across the driveway. So she called to clarify. In fact, she says, listen, we're really not a clinic. We are an office of a healthcare practitioner. And the way she described the activities, she was more than happy to provide any sort of documentation we might need. So if that is accurate, which I have no reason to believe it's not accurate, then she actually wouldn't be impacted by this change at all. So there would be no creation of nonconformity with that site. So that would be a correction that we would make in the subsequent report to the city council. As far as the language, and I apologize for the language, my kids always remind me that I'm old-fashioned or worse, whatever terminology they throw at me, I'm behind the times. I just figured out the word sus. You guys, I used the word sus in my house yesterday. My son just laughed hysterically. He just couldn't
Well,
believe
if it's any
it.
consolation, Carlos, my 35-year-old once told me that I was so 20th century.
Oh, so 20th century.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm there too. So,
Heard that.
so I am more than happy to check with the city attorney's office to see if changing the term from substance abuse to substance
Use disorder.
Substance use disorder. If it's just a minor change, that's basically like an administrative thing that wouldn't change the tenor of the whole thing and make it start from scratch.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I'm sure we would be happy to make that change.
Absolutely. That'd be great. So pop-up clinics, so a pop-up event for whatever the substance use disorder that we're addressing at that particular date, would they need to, if it was at an existing Riverbend or Concord Coalition and Homeless, wherever the facility was, would they need to apply for an event permit if they had ample amounts of parking or ample amounts of space available?
So if we're talking about a use, like let's use the Riverbend one.
Mm-hmm.
So the Riverbend, which would be grandfathered with this change.
Yeah.
So they could operate as they've been operating, whatever that they've
Sure.
been doing
Yeah.
throughout. So if the clinics are if that outreach is part of their daily operation today, that would continue. If they're doing something, now I'm thinking about a location, for example, that may not, I think it was mentioned maybe like stores or some offices and things like that, that aren't necessarily clinics per se, but they partner with you and they do a special day, right? Is that correct?
So like the Concord Center and homelessness, they don't do medical services normally.
Right.
But yeah, so we've had vaccine clinics at their site. I think we've also done a church that the Friends program has like reserved for us to bring in families and provide Narcan trainings and flu
So church is a great example, all right?
Yeah, church is definitely part of the question. That's often, they're the most kind in allowing us to use their spaces, and they're definitely not
Schools,
traditionally
yeah.
used for that.
How about schools?
And we do a lot of vaccines in schools.
Okay.
And that would be in one of these districts.
And we do Narcan trainings in police departments and town halls. Yeah, and so we define it as a clinic. The vaccine clinics is what we would use for that kind of.
I just don't want it to be like they have to get a permit every time they do
No,
one of
and
these.
I don't want you to get that impression. I apologize if that was what was described.
Yeah.
I was saying, if it's something like the way it was described just
Yeah,
now, where
just like that.
it doesn't, depending, this is, you always have to think about, okay, how frequent is this? It doesn't sound like it's very
It's not every
frequent.
Friday at 3 o'clock, and this
Right,
is gonna
right.
happen on
So
this location.
It's
Yeah.
not likely to become anyone would consider it a principal use, so in those type of circumstances, we don't have any issue with that.
Gotcha,
I was mentioning permits if you did, like, for example,
We need to shut down Main Street to do it.
right, if everybody wanted to like, if people were vaccinating in the numbers that they probably should, right?
Gonna
and
close
they-
Main Street down.
You might have to close part of the sidewalk down, or part of the street down to
Then you need a
accommodate
permit,
cars.
then you need a permit to do
Permit
it.
from us, right.
Go ahead, what do you got?
Just got
Since
vaccinated.
we've got you right there, I won't even come back up, but, so there is a Rite Aid and a CVS that exists within both of these zones. Both the Rite Aid and the CVS do offer walk-in medical services. Does this impact their ability?
They're existing uses, so they're covered.
They're covered.
They just keep doing business just like they normally do. Yes, sir,
I have a
Matt?
question about that. Maybe Carlos or Heather just left. As long as they don't change their use. So if CVS or whichever pharmacy is in that, if they decide they're going to do something different, then that would not be grandfathered.
Correct. So if CVS goes away, and that space becomes whatever other use, and they want to start doing a clinic, then yes, then they would not be grandfathered.
Like, but a convenient MD could not move in there and do what they do. I mean, anything like that, clear choice.
Right, there would probably be some finite examination of time, perhaps. I'd have to check with the city attorney just to make sure, because if one closed down and the next one opened, and the very next day, it's just a different name, a label onto it, I'd rather not answer that here because I'm not really certain.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, I would think that would be quite a bit different, because
Right.
an urgent care is gonna have actual doctors, not clinicians and nurses, so that steps it up to a higher level of
That's
service.
right. So along the same lines, CVS or Rite Aid or whoever it is doing X, Y, and Z, and all of a sudden now a new whatever has to be, whatever. We're still not changing the use. They're still doing their core business isn't changing. So, it's COVID today, it's something else, it's something, whatever the vaccinations are, I don't want to say anything that's derogatory, but whatever the next thing is, it's still going to be grandfathered in under
Right,
that.
and so what we would look at too is we'd look at whatever the principal use is that the CVS is on there, so to see if the
Yeah.
principal use is something like
principal use.
pharmacy, for
Yeah.
example, that's its principal use,
Yeah.
and the other thing is a secondary, because in the grand scheme of its whole
Perfect.
operation, it's probably minor.
Perfect. And name change is same, it's going to be the same principal use, so that's not going to change.
So if they did substance use, CVS decided to do substance use treatment, is that permissible?
If CVS decides to do substance, so well, I'll use the right term, substance use
Use
disorder treatment.
Yeah.
And they're not doing it, and they don't
Okay.
start doing it until after the ordinance is adopted, no, I don't believe they would,
Not by right, yeah.
Yeah, that would probably create an
Splitting
issue.
hairs at that point, though, again.
Right, yeah,
But you're
again,
right, because you're going to split
The
hairs.
lawyers sort of figure out.
Yeah, you are, yeah.
Good questions, excellent questions. I will take those under advisement and definitely try and get answers, assuming this goes to the council at the next meeting.
I have one other question on your pop-up clinics. So if they do a pop-up at the homeless shelter down on Main Street, now, and after this passes, do they have to do anything to do their pop-up clinic? Do they have to have permission? Do they have to do anything? Or they just do a pop-up clinic?
Because they're doing it now.
So the Homeless Resource Center is not impacted by this change, because it's not in the CBP as far as I can tell. The Homeless Resource Center, we're talking on North Main Street, towards the end, before, right, Dana Franklin, across from where the Friendlies used to be, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's not CBP, so it's.
Well, that
not
wasn't
being
my great example then.
River-
So
Riverbed.
so my question is really, if they are doing it, if they want to do it in the CBP, And do they have to, since it's a pop-up clinic and it's not a primary use, it's a, you know, you do it this week, you might do it again a month from now, do they have to get permission, or do they just do their clinic?
I think he said before that pop-ups can be any.
Right, they can be
anything.
anywhere.
So pop-ups aren't principal use, so you could do that
Right, that's what I'm asking. So if she wants to do a pop-up,
at the church up on Fisherville Road.
Right.
Absolutely.
but if she wants to do a pop-up at the church right there at the corner of Pleasant and
She
State
can still.
Street, city's not involved, she does it.
She does it. Yeah.
As long as it's not impacting the roadway or sidewalks.
Right.
That type of thing.
It's principal
And
use.
that's what you're doing now.
It's, as long as it's not every single day from 12 to noon, or 12 to noon.
Yeah, but if she
From,
ends up doing
from
it
9 to noon every single day.
Whatever hours.
Whatever it is, 12 to noon, sorry you missed it. But, so it's a non-principal use, so
But
you'd
if
be
she
able to
does
do
it
it.
once a week,
And you
she
could do it
still-
anywhere.
If she does it once a
So-
week, she can do it.
So I just, you're all on the right track. I think we're all saying kind of the same thing. I just don't want to put timelines associated with it without checking with the attorneys, because I don't know what the frequency would be that would trigger. Now it's no longer an accessory use, it's like a principal use all of a
True,
sudden.
yeah, so.
Maybe it's a
that is-
permit that has to be applied for like once a year to allow
Okay.
once a month or whatever consistently or something.
I think that was it for questions, right?
Yeah,
Or that was it for what you wrote. Any other questions from the board? Any other questions? No? Okay, we're gonna close the public hearing. Any discussion? Byron?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we remove the, we remove the general commercial zone from the proposed E6 district. And if I have a second, I'll speak to it.
Absolutely, yep.
I'll second it.
Thanks, Carol. It occurs to me, looking at the descriptions that Mr. Bahia provided for the neighborhood commercial district, that, from my perspective anyway, the size and scale of some of the proposed types of uses in the E6, proposed E6 district would, in fact, have an impact on, based on their size and scale in this zone. And so I would think, for that reason, that this, that the general commercial zone is not appropriate for the E6.
Okay, so you're looking at it and saying strike out, which is CG. in
CG,
your
yes,
packet.
sir.
So your use number is CG, which is commercial general. Anything like this that we haven't already looked at, or this is in this district, or this is in this district, or I just, we're fishing a little bit as far as we're not really sure what's in that district and what would be affected by it now, so.
I would point out that city council will be voting on anything we pass,
Okay, so
assuming we do pass.
We can
and then staff-
recommend it, and they can report on it. So if staff can report on anything that is a red flag, we can, that's fine, okay. Any questions or comments? So I think we got a motion to do that and a second. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Teresa?
I'm just uncomfortable voting for that, having not had the presentation by Danielle or Carlos as to what, I mean, we haven't done our homework on that.
So how about this?
It's fine if you do it at city council. I'm just not comfortable voting on that.
How about if we, since the homework has been done on the two that we're striking
Right,
out,
right.
if it goes ahead, recommend that the change be made, and secondarily recommend that also with some homework and a report back to city council, that the CG district be also excluded going forward. But I mean, I'm sensitive to that. I haven't looked at it. We haven't reviewed it. So if we approve it and say, yes, we've already looked at it and know these two are good, and we'd also like to recommend that the CG be added to this group, and staff can then report on it to city council.
I would be more comfortable.
Are we comfortable letting city council make that decision? That's the question.
Well, it doesn't make any difference whether or not. It's their decision.
Jeff?
Do you want to say you want to exclude it, or you say it should be considered for exclusion by the city
Yeah,
council?
I'm more comfortable, I'm more comfortable with.
Because the way you were, it
what
makes
you're
it
saying.
sound like it's automatic
like
if
we
they
wanna do
agree,
it.
where.
Chairman, I'll amend my motion
So let's have it, yep.
to consider exclusion
To
of
consider exclusion of
the
CG, of the
CG.
CG zone. We still have a
After
second
doing
on
the
that?
research.
Yes.
Okay, the second's still valid. Any other discussion regarding that?
Now, I just have one more question. With this, as I understood the conversation, is not impacting what these ladies do with their good work.
That's exactly right.
Is that what they understand as well?
Existing buildings, existing locations are not affected.
So that's on the
I want
record.
to be very precise. I still think that them being in non-conforming use should be closely considered. It does box the building into being able to do further renovations, expansions, changes to the building, things like that.
I don't know that changes to the building would change the use on the property. You know, we're not talking the physical envelope of the building. We're talking the use of the property, right? I think, again, we're getting into legal issues here, so I'm not 100% sure.
If the use is non-conforming, it affects what they can do on the property.
So as soon as they make changes.
I don't know
then-
the extent of that. It's a complicated area of code.
So if they suddenly doubled the size on an existing lot,
Does that open up the chain, does that open up, but again, it opens up all the changes that we'd make them do ADA, we'd make them do things.
Expansion of a non-conforming use requires a special exception, I believe.
But
Is
it
that
doesn't
correct?
change I don't know that.
Yeah,
don't know the answer.
I guess that's my, excuse me, my question is, could those changes be made through a special exception, or is it just a,
Some could be made through a special exception, some might need a variance.
but there would
that's-
be a mechanism for an existing non-conforming use to
change.
expand
And come before the board to get
with
approval.
some approval process?
Not by the planning board, by the zoning board.
Zoning board.
Special exception.
Special exception.
For expansion of a use. Yeah.
You good, Carlos?
Yes, and as long as you're comfortable, the way I understand, is there a motion actually, or just?
There is.
We've got a
There's a
motion and a
motion.
second on the table.
Oh, it's just a yeah, I apologize, it was in the back, so I
Yep.
was distracted. The motion is to recommend approval, but to consider an exclusion of CG at the council level?
So yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
I will say I'm still going to vote no.
Okay.
And it's not because I don't agree with what you're doing, it's because I just don't quite feel we know all the answers of who we're impacting.
Yep. Okay.
And I certainly, because these ladies do wonderful work for people who really need help, and I don't want to, without having really done the homework, impact what they do.
Yep. And just remember, again, I think the special exception and
Right.
it doesn't affect existing buildings. It doesn't affect use today. And if you expand and double the size, you come back in for a special exception to say, we've been doing it for X years. We want to continue to do it, and here's the new plan.
Yes, I'd just like to see, I'd like the legal folks to take another look and come
Yep.
back and, so,
Okay.
but that's okay, because it's going to pass, you don't need me.
Well, you never know. Okay, any other discussion? So we've got a motion and a second on the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
By hand?
Oh,
By hand?
aye, sorry.
Two
Aye.
opposed, Matt and Teresa.
For the same reasons.
Yeah.
The same, yeah, 100%, I get it 100%. Okay, thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you, Carlos, for your testimony. And you can stick around if you want. You don't have to leave.
The end is the most exciting time.
Thank you very much for your
Thank
testimony.
you for your
Thank you.
patience sitting through.
Okay, brings us to item 8 on our agenda. Any other business which may legally come before the board? Anything on your docket?
Yes, we wanted to get the board's feedback. So Concord Hotel, Mr. Simchick has reached out to us asking if, well, they would like to come back to ADR to modify the conditions of their approval with regard to the LED lights. So right now, they have approval to have a single static color, though they are allowed to change that color on a daily basis. I don't know the exact frequency, but it's daily, it's not hourly or anything like that. So they would like to get an amendment to their approval to allow a multicolored light, static light. So again, not moving light, but for instance, on July 4th, a red, white, and blue light. So they they're able to, so they can come to ADR and request that amendment. However, they are asking, and this is what I'm asking for the board's feedback on, they're asking to be able to do a trial run on Christmas Eve to show the community what the impact would be and what it would look like.
I'll vote for that.
So you're in favor of that?
I am
Okay.
totally in favor of a test case.
Can we maybe do a motion?
So
I'll make a motion.
Yeah, so the motion is to allow the Concord Hotel.
Hotel
at-
Concord.
At whatever, yes, Hotel
Yeah, there's a
Concord, at
difference.
whatever, to do a trial run Christmas Eve. How about Christmas and New Year's?
Oh, please.
Come on.
Let's not get
Christmas
carried away.
Eve.
Okay.
Allow for multiple lights to be displayed for the Christmas Eve night.
And I would request that we work with the owner to publicize it, so the city, the public in general
Public can
knows
see and feel
the
that, yeah.
reason and knows that they can provide
That's a great
feedback.
suggestion.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
So publicize it on their
That's,
social media.
if there's a way to do
Okay.
that, you know, I'm just thinking, it's great to say you're gonna do it, but if
Right.
half the city doesn't notice it
Right.
and doesn't understand what's going on, they just think, oh, they changed the lights today.
So we can talk to the monitor reporter, she's, oh.
No,
Need a
it's not.
second,
So,
please.
so we got a motion on the table, anybody have to second that?
Second.
David's gonna second it, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, that motion carries. Anything else before the board?
No, sir.
All right, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's made, roundly seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, that motion carries, we are adjourned, thank you very much, late night, 10 o'clock, we haven't done to 10 o'clock in a while.
Go home and have supper.
Yeah, me too.